We're live.
Hey there, everybody.
What's up, everybody? Welcome to Actuali Podcast. I'm Chris.
I'm DJ.
We are two friends, two brothers in musical and artistic arms who together are going through this Awakening from the Meaning Crisis series by Professor John Vervaeke out of University of Toronto. This is our third reflections on our first 10 episodes thus far. So we've been doing these watch-alongs with each episode as we go. I got to make sure we're going live on Facebook as I speak. That's a step function over here. All things happening behind the scenes you're seeing in the front.
So this is the third episode of our reflections of the first 10 episode, where we're summing up our insights on the first 10 episodes.
Indeed.
We had a nice long one, got a little loosey-goosey, but it's important. Every now and again when you're studying, you should have a study party, if you will.
True.
Bust out the Mountain Dew and Funyuns and
Yes. Keep talking for me, DJ, while I get this rolling here.
I'm getting distracted watching him do that. So
Yeah. Reflections thus far.
Yeah, and we're using notes from, what's his name? I need to get glasses.
Oh, this is Mark Mulvey.
Mark Mulvey's
And
notes.
on Mark Mulvey's Medium, so you go to Mark Mulvey, MULVEY.medium.com, you can find great notes summarizing each episode of this immense 50 lecture series, which I actually have to say I feel is quite worthwhile for just about everybody out there to have a chance to get into.
Yeah, it's good for your brain.
It is. Well, it's helpful.
It's good for your spirit.
It's helpful in understanding why humanity is in these times of social strife, social breakdown, increasing discord, entrenched divides, tribalism, all of that.
And
Yo, what's up, Facebook? Welcome back to Actuali. We are rolling. Yep, looks like it's happening.
This is our third reflection video on the first 10 episodes.
Indeed.
We're going to try to what is it, episode 3 to 10 that we got to get through?
Well, we got through 3.
Got through 3.
And so now we got to go 4 through 10. As I remember, I hope that's right.
No, I think that's right. Yeah.
And so, this is our third reflections on the first 10 episodes of John Vervaeke's Awakening from the Meaning Crisis. Really, this is giving ourselves a chance to catch up with ourselves and with all of you, anyone that finds this along the way. Perhaps this gives you a chance to catch up as well with the previous episodes in the series. I try and make sure I'm including that link wherever I share these live streams. We're happening live on Twitch, on Facebook, and YouTube. But you can just go straight onto YouTube and search Awakening from the Meaning Crisis, and you'll find John Vervaeke's Awakening from the Meaning Crisis. John Vervaeke's a professor out of Toronto that put together this 50-part lecture series for the world, for all of us, to understand how we got to what he has termed the meaning crisis, this time of social breakdown and increasing division and sense of meaninglessness, as well as at the same time, that's like the dark side of the meaning crisis. Mm-hmm. On the bright side of it, there is this increasing interest in mindfulness practices, meditation, Eastern and Western mysticism occurring here in the West and around the world, but it's certainly influencing culture here and elsewhere. And so you see that thing happening. That's kind of the yin and yang of the meaning crisis that humanity is in, and how may we awaken from the meaning crisis is the subject of the lecture series, which we've been covering and doing these watch-alongs with the previous 10 episodes.
Yeah. Well,
hopefully that catches you all up.
And whether or not we know what's happening, we still feel something, and we're going to inevitably be drawn to,
no doubt,
a lot of different things that claim to be remedies and not, and whatnot. And I think what this series goes over, if anything, can just help you learn how your mind works, how you gather things, and how not to be prone to this is an actual term, bullshit.
Technically.
Yeah, so forgive me.
It's a psychological term, though. It's a way that we can lie to ourselves, but it's clever. It's clever because it's bullshit.
Yeah.
When you see bullshit, it's bullshit, but sometimes bullshit is super salient.
Yeah.
Like the commercial that shows the very attractive person with the car and the beautiful sunset that they've achieved, that they've found, and that you're going to get all of this great Zen paradisal feeling from buying this car.
Yeah, right. It'll solve all your problems. You'll have everything
So
that
they're
you
trying
want.
to sell us being mode needs with having mode. And so we can confuse having mode and being mode. That's called modal confusion.
I got a good story.
That's a big part of how we got ourselves into a meaning crisis.
Yeah. So I every year I watch the what is it, the Christmas Story. You shoot your eye out, kid. Well, so Ralphie's all excited because he got his whatever little Annie or whatever decoder ring thing. And he's so excited, and so now he could get the secret messages on the radio, and he wrote them all down, and it he translated it painstakingly, and it just said, "Remember to drink your Ovaltine." And that was the moment he realized it was all bullshit. Yeah. It was pretty cool though, Hey, well, family tradition, Christmas Story. But since watching this series, you notice
Christmas
little things
Story's
like
classic,
that are just hidden in the old movies and the old media, like little lessons.
Truth.
And with a good story, like in this case, it's the kid coming to realization of the bullshit of everything.
Right.
And then he lost hope because he didn't think he was going to get it, but then he got the gun, and then he shot his eye out, and then he had to come up with a story, and then there used to be really good lessons in old movies and stuff. What happened?
Good question.
Oh yeah, that's right.
We've kind of lost ourselves a little bit. It's still out there though. There's still great media, but there is a lot of really weird stuff right now as well. That's just confusing as we try and find ourselves.
Yeah, well, there's the idea of the modern audience too, and modern sensibilities, which, like, to a certain extent, yeah, but like for the most part, we're still driven by the same stories and the same, whether they're hero stories or journeying stories or this, that, or the other. And that, what makes a story good is what virtues does it encode in the story. So when you live through the story, it's almost like going through the path of gaining these virtues as the hero gains the virtues.
Mm-hmm. That's why they appeal to us so much. We think and live and act through story making minds. It's like the feature of our consciousness that
stories
gives us a sense of value to everything.
It's an old psychotechnology, but then with the adaptation of being able to write things down, now you could write down a story into a book, and now you can film a story, or you can make a play, or you can make it all out of 3D if you want to now. But it's just what do they call it? Exapting, the original psychotechnology of telling a story to relate. Now you can
use
different psychotechnologies.
John Vervaeke terminology there, I see.
Trying to.
Exacting. The exacting term is something that we learned about that describes how the brain can take a capacity to do one thing.
And not just the brain,
the tongue, which is to taste and check for poison and to move things around the mouth, we've used to learn to speak and form language.
And so we're doing it.
So you can exact. The brain is really good at taking.
And we're doing that process with psychotechnology on top of psychotechnology, because first it starts out with the ability to tell the story, and then the ability to make it into literature, literacy.
Yeah, language, then being able to tell the story and speak it.
And then we're now merging it with
literacy.
high-level technologies that aren't just psychotechnologies. But then think about games. We've taken stories into games as well. So now we're back to the shaman end of things, and you're being the deer or being the hunter or being the whatever. So it's like they're all building off on top of each other.
Acting.
And then,
we love to act out and play through things.
Yeah. And like the
we
play.
like to practice challenges because, I love this idea that, or this aspect of human reality, that we get these endorphin rushes when we're tuning into our environments really well.
Mm-hmm.
It's like this yes response, this physical response in our biology that we get of pleasure positive chemicals, endorphins releasing when you're on the right track, when you're taking good care of yourself, when you're being loving towards others, you get lots of that good old oxytocin.
Yeah. Don't forget to get your daily grump out either. Grump once a day and you'll live longer.
Well, that's where the workout comes in, right?
Yeah.
You know,
Just get
movement
and also
practice,
if you externalize the grump for a moment, just
music is
meh.
good for that. Writing, art is really good for that. Some way to, take the bullshit and turn it into something beautiful.
A quick grump, because if it builds up too long inside, then it just becomes this protracted moaning on and on and on about something. But you get a grump, like, something happens and you just go, walk off. As I find myself doing that, I'm just get the grump out.
Yeah, just get it out.
Yeah.
Get it out and then be done with it, right?
Some of the happiest people I
like
know
that.
are some of the grumpiest people I know. There's something about that.
It's the hanging on to that, and letting it consume you.
Yeah.
That gets painful.
Yeah. Well,
But we can all do that.
Tools.
We're all prone to that, you know.
it's all tools, and we don't want to overuse certain tools when we could use other tools.
Mm-hmm.
You might hurt yourself using certain tools that you shouldn't be using for that task. Kind of like so. Well,
Gotta be
we'll
mindful.
save that. We'll save it till we get to that episode because I don't want to cross over like too far down. But it's gonna get to the scaling up and scaling down part. But I think I'll wait for when we get there.
Yeah, we'll get there. All right, guys, so we're going to jump into it. This is covering Awakening from the Meaning Crisis by John Vervaeke. Oh, hit that Be Right Back channel. Hey, here we go.
Oh no, we're right back.
We're right back.
All right.
I like the way that John lays these notes out. This quote here is on point. Wisdom is keeping our truth machinery and your relevance machinery tightly coupled together so you don't bullshit yourself. Your truth machinery and your relevance machinery, so how your brain realizes what is relevant, understanding that process, and then the machinery by which we come to comprehend what is true.
Mm-hmm. So
As true as we can get it. So we begin with ancient Greece. And this world where people believed that there were certain like oracles that who could speak to the gods. People could speak to the gods through oracles. Mark notes. These notes by Mark Mulvey here, and we're going to utilize these to help guide our way through. One of the most important was at Delphi. A woman, Pythia, who would sit in a cave. Remember, shamanism is associated with caves, possibly with intoxicating gases present. Or she was eating eucalyptus leaves, possibly.
Or all of it.
Or drinking some kind of psychedelic blue lotus tea, And people would come and pose questions to her. And she would speak on behalf of the gods. So we got a picture, actually.
So this person was really important, and this people
There's
take her
Pythia.
seriously. It's not some guy online. This is like, the pinnacle of the truth is this oracle person. So
This is how they could speak to the gods. This was really the only way,
and this leads us into the story of
as they knew it.
was it Socrates?
Mm-hmm.
And
Yeah. The thing about being an oracle is, this is a quote of John Vervaeke's. The thing about being an oracle is, if you want to stay in business, you don't want to give specific answers. So a bunch of Socrates' friends, here's a story. They go to the oracle, they ask questions about Socrates. Is there anyone wiser than Socrates, they ask. And the oracle answers, no. A crystal clear answer.
Yeah, and that's rare because, like in order to be right all the time, you have to be very vague.
Mm-hmm.
So there was a lot of vagary, like, like white goose settles during a blue moon and yada, yada, yada.
Right.
And this was a resounding no.
No.
No, there is no one.
When told of this, Socrates isn't self-congratulatory, so his friends go back and they tell him. And this is telling, given that we're living in an age of confirmation porn, really. The accelerating and exacerbation of our collective tendency to seek confirmation of things we already believe or want to believe. So confirmation bias, basically. The pernicious confirmation bias.
Yeah, it's almost like an addictive drug too. You get that dopamine blast when you find the thing supporting your thing.
Yeah.
Whether it be doom scrolling or, the look, I'm right, this thing proves it. or even to the opposite of that. If it's not this,
It's a sense
this,
of
and
self-security, you know. It's a false sense of self-security. So they're you're bullshitting yourself.
Well, and perhaps it really comes from like our tendency. We really want to know what's true and what is real, because when we don't have a grasp of what's true or real, it's horrific. It's terrifying. It scares us.
But when we got something that we think is
Yeah,
real,
we hold
wanna
on to it,
and
yes.
we're afraid to look at anything else that could counter it,
yes.
because we think that we've got at least a firm hold on reality now, even if it's a bad thing. You know, even if it's like some nihilistic viewpoint on reality, people get very certain.
Yeah.
That certainty closes us off to new information.
That it does.
So Socrates, he got himself in trouble because for him the gods represented moral exemplars, which they weren't before this point to people.
Yeah,
the gods
were flawed.
were very powerful.
They were philanderers and egotists, and
But
just
they
downright
had all
nasty
kinds of
people
human traits.
sometimes.
Yeah, they certainly weren't
Well,
moral exemplars.
I like to think of it like this: the gods at that point in time were there to represent things within us. Like
we were just trying to understand, why do storms happen? What are the stars?
So there's the gods within us,
gods
like
of
the
earthquakes
Aphrodite
and
and love and all that stuff, and then you have the gods associated with anger and warfare, and you have gods associated with this, that, or the other. So we were making gods of our components within us, whereas Socrates, he switched to thinking, well, no, gods, if they're so much greater and bigger, they should have much bigger values than we do.
They switched that. Yeah.
Because it's like celebrity and political celebrity, if you have terrible character and you're on top, you can reap terrible results. And I think Socrates was a man that realized the world actually wasn't on a terrible trajectory. It wasn't like the gods were actively trying to destroy us. It was like, if they're in order,
we were realizing our own responsibility. We were starting to realize the cause and effect we were having on our environments and one another.
That's a big shift
as we became more and more powerful.
How we look at God really shows where we're at with our understanding of ourselves in nature, in relationship to our universe and our world.
Yes, and by powerful I mean we became more and more effective at manipulating our environments, and large groups of people were able to coordinate. And create larger and larger projects, cities, temples, and massive complex structures and industries and so on. All of this because we developed language and the series of psychotechnologies, including the way that our brains think at this point in terms of story. Even.
Yeah. And the idea of placeholder things like the token, this thing can hold the place for an idea. Was very important, not just for money, but also for religious artifact and other things like that. This represents the idea of a god.
And measure things, and then we started to measure ourselves psychologically according to how we pair or match up against other people. And we started to think in a less interconnected, more tribal orientation, previous tribal orientation, into a more. It was a totally different new opening.
And this was like the start of the era
but this is also the formation of our misidentification with what we are. Like we're this life function and this awareness, but there's this projection of a personality that we live through and we act through, and that is a jumble of thoughts, and that thing is in constant flux. That thing is malleable. That thing is formable.
It's not just an A, B, C relationship. It's an A, B to C back to A to B.
Yeah, we have certain dispositions that we can be born with to some degree, but even those things can be changed within oneself because our brains are so plastic, and meaning that we are constantly reforming our networks and growing new networks and brain cells as we go. And that's how we're able to exact. We can take a neural network that's made for one thing, and for something entirely different we can actually turn it into something as complex as speaking, like the tongue and so previous example. So let's jump back in here. For Socrates, the gods represent moral exemplars, ways in which we can self-transcend and morally improve. So something to aim and something greater than even we are.
Thus
something of ultimate
worship,
virtue.
like a god.
Yeah, something worthy of worship, an ideal worthy of worship. For us to all be able to be this good, this loving, this great, this wise, all of these things, what could we do? How much more peaceful and loving and joyful would life be? This was a big deal, though. It's axiomatic that the gods cannot lie to him, and yet he is resistant to the oracle's answer. He's convinced he is not wise.
Yes.
So Socrates made the quote, the idea. Know thyself, his personal slogan for life. This phrase was inscribed at the side of the Delphic Oracle. Know thyself means understand how you operate, not your autobiography, so to speak, but your owner's manual. Socrates thought that this kind of self-knowledge was essential. So now he faces a dilemma. How can he be the wisest human being when he knows he is not wise? Socrates begins a quest then to find out how both of these could be true at the same time. He walks around asking questions of people to try to get to the bottom of things. And here he is utilizing what later becomes known as the Socratic method, a technique of asking questions in order to draw someone out, their true authenticity. He would try and draw out. The two groups of people credited with being wise were the natural philosophers in this time of ancient Greece and the sophists. Pythagoras actually invented the word philosophy, which comes from philia, for friendship, love, like communal love, friendship, love, and Sophia, wisdom. So this is like a communal love of wisdom. He created community around him to pursue wisdom. A philosopher is someone who, in concert with others, is a lover of wisdom. That's very succinct. That's a quote from Vervaeke there. So Thales is the first natural philosopher we know of, and since what remains is so fragmentary, it can basically be summarized in 3 sentences. All is the moist. The lodestone has psyche. Everything is filled with gods. So this was the first time that human beings here in the West were trying to figure out what are the constituent elements of life, what is it made of. So how would you describe all as the moist?
So all is the moist is everything has has a certain type of characteristic that is like water. Metal, you heat it up to a certain extent, it is like water. Mm-hmm. Earth, if you vibrate it enough, is like water.
Right.
And so then if you scale that down, well, everything must be made up of, say, water.
Yeah, there's water above that comes from above. There's water below when you drill down.
And the idea of, water being pure. Like, you purify things with water. So it seems like it's the most fundamental. Maybe it does
ultimately turn into water.
Yeah.
This is their best idea at the time.
And then the logo has psyche. Psyche is the ability to manipulate and like, say, in this case, move something directly, but to manipulate to affect. To almost like, because your psyche helps you interact and affect in the world. So what a lodestone, if people aren't familiar with what that is, that's basically just a natural magnetic rock that has varying degrees of magnetics, but isn't like the modern magnets we have. It's just enough that you can notice, oh, this has an effect on iron things.
Yes. So these natural philosophers, this represents a fundamental change in human cognition. This is from my notes here. I remember when Vervaeke said this.
Well, this is
so we're noticing, okay, humans have gotten themselves to this point to now they're inquiring into the fundamental nature of reality.
And using a scientific method.
Speaking of rationality,
a
scientific method, indeed, yes.
And though Thales may have been wrong, like initially, not everything's water, and the lodestone doesn't actually have a psyche. But he was right more than he was wrong, at least functionally within where he was at.
Right. Yes.
In the universe, for understanding the universe. And like an example that was used in this episode
was... The intentionality was right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, we still function as if the earth is flat. You drive, you think, okay, that is flat, but it's not. It's round. And we really don't...
But it feels flat to us. Yeah, we don't act like we're on a ball.
And we can put it on a flat map and, distort it a little bit to, get around it, with certain things. But for the most part, for your everyday, it's flat. The ground is flat. Gravity goes down.
Yes.
Which will lead us to, I can't read that, but in this episode talking about, I forget whose insight it was, like the idea that, things that are like each other, like to go towards each other, and that's gravity.
Yes.
The pen is like
the lodestone has psyche. We're about to get to that. Yeah. So Thales, the first natural philosopher we know of, and since what remains, okay, so we got that. Mm-hmm. All is the moist. DJ summed that up really, really well there. Putting aside the literalness of the statement, we can remember that Greece is surrounded by water. Water falls from the sky. Water is what people need to live. Water takes the shape of any container. It's false, but it's actually quite rational. That's a good insight. And so he's not doing mythology anymore. There's no divine agent involved. They're literally trying to do natural science, basically. Mm-hmm. So this is the natural philosophers versus the sophists. And So let's move on here. So the lodestone has psyche. The lodestone is a kind of natural magnet,
Yeah.
so it can move things, move itself and other things. Psyche referred to anything that is a living or self-moving, the capacity to make things move. So
self-moving is
Yeah.
I forgot to put that in there, but that's kind
living
of
things and
important.
magnets can make things move. What he's ultimately described as trying to get as the underlying force behind things.
Yeah.
That's good.
What is the prime moving force, if you
There
will?
you go. Yeah, yeah.
Which
And
is
so-
almost like asking what is God, but
Yes, and so this is basically the beginning of ontology.
yeah.
That's what ontology means. That's the study of being and the structure of reality. Dale is introducing the ontological analysis that drives the scientific revolution.
Yeah.
This kind of analysis of the study of being and structure of reality is what drives the scientific revolution. Even scientists today are trying to get at the underlying forces and understand the depths of reality. So ontological depth perception is increasing, isn't it?
And doing
But it never seems to get to the end.
and doing it in a way that's not like, well, how would you say it? Theologistical, like a theology, which a theology is incorporating everything into an understanding
Well, this is
of
the
what is
beginning
good.
of where you could see where that separation could have come from. In this time for Greece, their spirituality was still merged with their scientific inquiry. So, but eventually, these branches of interest that were a part of a holistic ecology of learning practices did branch.
And this is probably the start of too, like there are no morals within everything is the moist, the lodestone has psyche, and
No, they're just trying to get at what is the
yeah,
fundamental nature of things.
yeah, so-
and physical
and,
reality,
well-
and they're trying to understand how is this thing made up? What are these constituent elements? That's where we get the idea of atoms.
so this is
from-
pretty. This
from
is
Greece.
so I would say this is beneficial to our growth of understanding as a species of the world. But I can also see the
Sure.
seeds of this meaning crisis in
Yes.
this because
Yes, you can.
once this
Well,
type of thing goes,
especially once we get into the sophists, it really starts to become striking. You're like, okay, this is what we've been doing to ourselves ever since.
remove the moral component for what is good in the
Oh yeah, no,
universe.
these
and
guys
just-
would get off on just being able to be so good at their rhetoric that they could argue any point for or against
Yeah.
and still win over the crowd. It didn't matter
Yeah.
what was the truth.
Yeah.
And that's quite dangerous, but that's modern media nowadays, isn't it?
modern media, academia.
Well, let's say no, that's not modern media. That's legacy, old school, corporate mass media style, the yellow journalist style, the greed that took over a legitimate enterprise known as journalism, the fourth estate.
Call it corporate. There's
It's
large
corporate.
corporations opposed to private businesses.
Mega media news channels and outlets, those guys.
But also, the idea of, you go to a certain school and you get some letters before or after or whatever your name. Suddenly, you're like, in certain circumstances, yes, trust them. If it's a doctor, trust them. But that's within a specific field. This weird thing that we got, well, just because you went to school for something means suddenly you're smarter and more educated about everything now. And it's like, well, no, not really. They've convinced
Sometimes.
you. Well,
Sometimes
depending on
not.
what you're studying.
Depends on the person, depends on the professors. It certainly depends on the idea, if how much ideology, ideological possession that is has infested.
And you have to
that
forgive me
academic
for being
food.
a little pessimistic on that end when it comes to.
No, I mean we should be aware. We should be wary.
Well, you can also see the roots of sophism in the idea of having a selective academy university that is prestigious, because you have to kind of have knowledge secreted away because if you don't, and everybody has access to it, no longer is your institution as
Yeah.
valuable as it was before.
It's an old symptom of our tribe. I mean, we've been tribal beings for so long. It was the educational facilities built by mostly the Catholic Church, I think, that then inspired the modern college institutions, which are a great idea. Let's have a higher level education and spread it out and make it increasingly available. Now we've got community colleges, and it goes on and on and on. A lot of them are very elitist, and we can certainly have. I would love to see us get back to the days of just going up on a hill where that old guy, in your town is
Or
always going to be, and all these other 20 philosophers talking around with him.
I'm sitting on the steps at the university and people
Learning
can
together. And I think that there's going to be a looser yet more comprehensive form of education coming. that will allow us to test our mettle on a lot of different subjects to see what really does interest us, even if initially we think it wouldn't, and then also really focus on the things that we do find greatly interest us, and that we get so interested in they don't feel like work, they're an interest. And then that that what that person's mode of being can be that primary mode that they could hold in their community, perhaps. So there's certainly, we got to get away from this factory industrial style education with the bells and the very strict amount of time that you got to be the forced acquiescence,
arbitrary,
mindless
forced acquiescence, because
the just the forced memorization and then regurgitation of facts that disappear in 2 months.
And if you don't know the answer, just remember, always mark C.
Yeah, things taught in an unenjoyable manner instead of teaching critical thinking.
Yeah, well,
not teaching kids how to think, just teaching them what to say.
Yeah, I think
on command, basically. So that training style needs to turn into actual education.
We have a scaling issue, like as far as, if it's public schools, there's a lot of kids that have to go through the public schools, and it's really hard to have 40 kids in a classroom and have an individualized education process for each one of those kids. So what I'm actually starting to see, even locally, is you have these micro school kind of things that teach the young people, and I'd like to see that.
Let's see more of that, yeah. Because people that want to homeschool their kids, and then a lot of those people do go on and start micro schools in their communities, and then the community starts to fund that thing. Then that can become a local community school again, and we can have this. Everybody in the same room, basically, the young kids up to the older kids, so the older kids can help teach the younger kids and help free up the teacher to move around the classroom as she needs to.
You could even do this in the higher education level as well, particularly in the realm of
the way. It should be the higher education and public school. The whole thing should be united into one giant network. You're all going to the same places, and you can learn on whatever level you're at on any subject.
Well,
so the 8-year-old genius can go into his high-level physics.
All the way. Well, and I'm thinking of on the community level, you'd have places that you could, as a community, set aside where these are places to talk of ideas. So you'd learn, actual philosophy, not did you read this person and this person and this person, and can you recite this? But no, what's going on with the day? What are we learning? What are we doing?
That'd be great.
Coffee houses used to kind of be like this.
I'd love to see it, man. I would love to see it. Well, anyway, yeah, let's get on though. That would be beautiful to see. I think that we can achieve that. That's part of awakening from the meaning crisis, right there. It's going to be us changing within our own selves, growing with our families, reconnecting with our families and our communities, and starting to come back together to build the world that we want to see. And we create our own great reset. We choose which phase, what kind of existence we phase into now as a species. Because we certainly are on this cusp. We are going through a phase shift. So ancient Greece was a... Oh, wait, I'm skipping. Socrates rejects the natural philosophers because they don't help him with his axial project. They give you truth without transformation. So this was, you were trying to get at this, it's like hard-boiled, materialistic, getting down to the nitty-gritty, trying to understand how things are actually made up. But there was no aspect of transcendence and self-realization, self-growth,
and
transformation
that's what
within
theology does.
Within this philosophy. And he's like, it needs to be a part of something broader. They don't give you truth. They give you truth without transformation. They don't indicate how you became wise or how you become wise or overcome self-deception or how to become a good person, which people say even today, like, be a good person.
Yeah.
Try and be a good person. Truth without relevance. What is the compelling reason to be good?
Yeah.
If there is no transcendent value.
Well, that if there was no transcendent value, then you get what can I do? Do whatever you want. And
you could do whatever you want.
We're seeing this now.
If there's no repercussions, if there's nothing like love, that is truly the fundamental nature of reality, or anything of that like. And at least that feels a conception of God that strikes the deepest.
And it doesn't have to be something big or grand. It just has to be bigger than man mankind, human.
Sure.
Whereas like say like the gods
A
previously,
higher ideal for us to.
previously the gods were depicted as the characteristics that make up the man.
Right.
Your libido, your rage, your love, your prosperity, the land on which you live on and how prosperous that is.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas this axial shift, Socrates' axial shift, is it's this standard is not the components that make up the man, but the man looking up to something much greater and aspiring to ascend.
Yes.
And then how
Turning the
to
gods
ascend.
into the ultimate hero archetypes.
Yeah.
And where is that how in the philosophy to transcend to these higher ideals?
Standing under understanding. Mm.
So, truly. And how do you get that without wonder?
Mm.
You got to wonder widely and deeply enough to think as broadly as possible. Because we do need some compelling moral reason.
Yeah.
And there does seem to be this thing called love and this miraculous existence that we happen to exist in as well. And this capacity, these higher level capacities for humans to tune into that Socrates found himself capable of. And he was trying to share, got himself killed for it. But it's a common theme.
What'd he say?
Common
Shut
theme in
him up.
history.
What was that?
Yeah.
Bill Hicks?
Bill Hicks, man. Yeah. He was one of the best. They give you truth without transformation. They don't indicate how to become wise or overcome self-deception. So ancient Greece was a direct democracy, which means your capacity to argue and persuade was a route to power. A new psychotechnology is created, rhetoric, the art of using language to change people's minds. The sophists, this is already becoming familiar. We're starting to feel like think politicians and media personalities. The sophists pick up on the fact that when we are communicating, we pick up on what is salient or seemingly relevant, not necessarily what is true. A modern example of where rhetoric is apparent is advertising, which leads us to an important concept to get into technically, and not just to be vulgar, but here's the term bullshit we were bringing up earlier. Harry Frankfurt's classic essay on bullshit gets into this and makes the distinction between someone who's a bullshit artist and someone who's a liar.
Yep.
A liar depends on your commitment to the truth, but bullshit makes you disinterested with whether or not what is being said is true.
Yeah, and so how are ways that we can increase saliency in things? Well, you can make it brighter, bolder, higher contrast, hit people in the feels, like the sad music, and the puppies with the eyes open, and, what's her name singing in the background. You can challenge somebody's ego and pride. You can, oh, you don't want to miss out on this, or else your neighbors are going to be a lot, like the old commercials where it show the neighbor washing their car.
Yeah,
and,
it can be used
and then, well, you got to get one too, or,
Yeah, it can be used to dishonestly manipulate the heck out of us. And so the sophists were only concerned with teaching the skills regardless of morality.
Yeah.
And so there's this problem on both sides for Socrates. A liar depends on your commitment to the truth, but bullshit makes you disinterested in whether or not what is being said is true. When someone is bullshitting you, they are trying to get you to not care how true the claim is, but to capture you with how catchy it is and how much it grabs your attention, how attractive it is.
I'm loving it.
Mm-hmm. It's crazy how it overrides the mind. Even though you know it's bullshit, it's like it still calls to you. Yeah. That's because they've used food science to load their foods, in the case of I'm loving it, with the perfect amount of sodiums and sugars to get all kinds of chemical dances to happen in your brain that make you addicted to it and love the taste and feel really good when you eat it till after.
Yeah.
Indeed. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, yeah. Every now and again, though, that first bite is like, wow, this is amazing. And then you get halfway through and you're like, oh, my God.
Yeah. They're just trying to mimic the taste of something freshly butchered or freshly cut and chopped and sauteed,
And so when it comes to lying,
all those good endorphins you get when you're getting high amounts of nutrients, it's hard to find sugar and salt in our environments, so we got very big spikes for interest in those chemicals, and we get huge responses when we find them to give us the urge to go long enough to find them again. And so that is massively used by industry today to manipulate the heck out of us.
Yeah, and
Shit's
so
good.
when the sophist lies, you can see it like, well, politicians are a really good example, and it doesn't matter what end of the spectrum you're on. Everybody knows that the politicians, if they've got good salience people, PR people, they can say whatever and they'll lie to you straight up. Oh, we'll do this for you. Well, I'm working for you. And I'm like, well, your bank account begs to differ, buddy.
Yeah, this is cool right here. So there's two sides to attention, and they can be caught by what you find as salient. You can know them by that. So when you pay attention to something, it becomes more salient. And you can direct attention to something to make it more salient. And it spins on itself until the attention is attached. And we lose capacity to know other things. So when something like, I'm loving it, grabs your attention, you're not thinking about other things when you hear that. It's very catchy. It just grabs your attention. The yellow lighting and the red makes you feel hungry. And it's just super salient. So
Remember
it
that
bypasses all of your other conscious activity. You're just like, this is what I'm most attending to right now with my perception, and that's how they can sell you on
So
something.
remember
How we can bullshit ourselves.
the Simpsons episode where Bart was recruited into a boy band that was really just getting people to join the Navy, and so he's talking to Lisa and he's like, yeah, you got subliminal, liminal, and superliminal. And the subliminal would be like the stuff in the music. The liminal would be like, your posters, join the Navy. And then she's like, well, it's superliminal. And he just yells out, opens the window and yells at some guy, hey, you, join the Navy. But the point on that, though, is that's where the bright, flashy colors or the flowery rhetoric that tricks your brain into thinking something's going on that's not going on. Mm-hmm. And there's something called doublespeak where you can, people can learn how to do this, where you can say absolutely nothing but use a whole bunch of words that keep triggering the person's brain, mm-hmm. but they don't realize they're not actually forming any actual
relation to one another. Yeah.
The landscape just keeps mushing
Kamala Harris
around.
is a master of this. Politicians in general.
Yeah, well, they teach politicians this.
Always the White House press person.
Oh,
they're always
Karine Jean-Pierre is not good at doublespeak. We'll just put it that way. Too many ums and ahs, but that's another. Oh yeah, yeah. Jen Psaki was much better at the doublespeak, and she still had problems. Wow. It's hard to be really
masterful
good at doublespeak.
Sophist.
Yeah, well, the sophists are intellectual doublespeak.
Socrates was antagonistic to the sophists.
Of course, as he should have been. Those people suck, and they need to be challenged.
Well, relevance without truth. The power to transform, but there was no actual good transformation happening. Yeah. Socrates wanted both. He wanted individuals who knew how to pay attention to truth and relevance, so we can let what's relevant become more apparent mm-hmm. to our environment of what we're attending to, and then we can define what is true more accurately from that.
And he was almost like, stealing, not usurping, but stealing power from the sophists, and they can't have that because you'd go out and talk with just normal people. And you can't have that. You can't have normal people learning how to use rhetoric to change each other's minds and you can't have that, because then you can't fool them. You can't bullshit them.
The Roman Congress became increasingly greedy and owned by the financial interests within the city that were greedy individuals amongst themselves that weren't willing to play fair or honorably, and so they became increasingly corrupt. The people of Rome became increasingly corrupt.
We're talking about Greece,
but this is following Greece. This is how the things broke down.
I think Greece had its corruption as well. Their representative democracy was not like an everybody; it was land-owning men.
Right. I was thinking about that quote when the Roman patriarch and the Roman people, I can't remember exactly how the quote goes, but it's talking about how Rome fell. This is certainly what happened in Greece as well. But it was the beginning of democracy.
Sure. Well,
at this point in the story,
it's a good idea to get people together and discuss ideas.
Yes.
But, if it's filled with people who are experts at bullshit, then mm-hmm. nothing gets done.
Yeah, so they're using language to change people's minds, but they're not necessarily doing so as wisely as they could be. And Socrates recognizes this. The sophists pick up on the fact that when we are communicating, we pick up on what's salient and irrelevant, not what is necessarily true. Mm-hmm. Modern example of when rhetoric is apparent is advertising, which leads us to an important concept, so we got that. A liar depends on your commitment to the truth. We got that. There's one last sentence. When someone is bullshitting you, they're trying to get you not to care how true the claim is, but to capture you on how catchy. So you can't lie to yourself, but this doesn't mean self-deception isn't possible, because you can bullshit yourself. This is something Vervaeke argues. This is because lying has to do with believing, which isn't something you directly do. You can hope that everyone loves you or wish it, but you can't voluntarily believe it. But you can direct your attention, which makes it more salient to you. Your attention can also be captured by what is more salient. This creates a positive feedback loop until your attention is attached to something and you lose the capacity to notice other things. That's how you bullshit or deceive yourself. So I think we covered that pretty well. It's the opposite of rational self-knowledge. Socrates saw this as the opposite of the axial revolution. Mm-hmm. What we need right now is another axial revolution for our time. Sophists represent relevance without truth. Socrates wanted both. He wanted those who found salient what they knew to be true, and for the truth that they found to help train their attempts to find salience. So this is aporia. The term aporia now, that the state people would fall into after Socrates questioned them to the point of not even knowing what is going on. This is the point that Socrates was trying to help people drive into and go through. He was trying to get people to realize how much each one of us is bullshitting ourselves all the time. This provokes a reaction in people, either anger or insight. The insight being, I need to transform myself to keep relevance and truth tracking each other and enabling each other. He got his answer to why he was the wisest of all humans. He knew what he did not know. And that's infinite, you know. And the unexamined life, he said, is not worth living. When they tried to force Socrates on the stand, when he had a chance to live, they said, just give up your teaching of wisdom to everybody and we'll let you live, okay? And he said, no, the unexamined life is not worth living. I won't stop doing this. And he even challenged them further, and he was like, you guys should actually pay me and feed me to do this.
That'd be the worst punishment.
That would be the worst punishment to me, because then I'd be stuck having to do this with you guys for the rest of my life. This is great, man. So Socrates was trying to get people to realize how much each one of us is bullshitting ourselves all the time. I've seen people argue that this was like a little bit egotistical of Socrates. He didn't need to go out like that. But that's another conversation.
I mean, it nailed the point home.
It made the point. He self-sacrificed for this point. I think that's why we remember it so well.
Oh, and he
was working on a high level of wisdom.
They would have killed him one way or another.
Long-term. Yeah.
This way, at least they can do it through trial instead of him being
This was going to be maximum
poisoned.
effect for him, I think, and he realized that. Yeah. This would reverberate, because he had friends that were well along their way as well, like his student Plato, which certainly did grow into his own. So this reaction provoked a reaction, anger or insight. He got the anger and said, unexamined life is not worth living. Wisdom is keeping your truth machinery and your relevance machinery tightly coupled together so you don't bullshit yourself. This is the practice of wisdom. This is why wisdom is so essential to us as human beings. Not just sheer intellectual capacity or physical prowess and capacity, but our wisdom. How do we wield our powers?
Well, even, for
best effect for ourselves and everyone around us.
And the weakest among us, like, say, physically, can still become very strong in their wisdom. The not so smart among us can still become very wise. Mm-hmm. Wisdom isn't necessarily a function of intelligence. Intelligence, it takes high-level intelligence, like people like Vervaeke, to look at these things, break them down, form them together. Sure. This wonderful man who wrote these notes, like, you do have to have intelligence for certain things, but, I don't know how to describe this without offending somebody, but
they're so interlinked, though.
But the wisdom of the idiot, that person the simpleton, I was in classes with the slow kids and the weird kids, and actually some of the insights that they have that are just very simple and just how they look at it, pretty freaking wise.
Deep consideration.
Like they know where they're at.
Deep consideration. A high amount of care about something, in fact, loving something, can help you deeply consider it, and that can help guide and develop that capacity for wisdom.
And it doesn't always come from vaulted high places.
No, but yet right here, I love how this is described. Wisdom is keeping your truth your capacity for comprehending truth, your truth machinery, and your relevance machinery, your capacity for realizing what is relevant in your environment, tightly coupled so that you're not bullshitting yourself. You can see around every single one of those ads and those political pitches. And in fact, maybe if you're even willing to do further research, challenge your own conceptions, and try and find the closest truth, sense of truth that you can get. And rather than favoring any one side, just be interested in what is true and what is going to be helpful and good for one and all. How can we grow together? What are methods and ways of conciliation when we find ourselves in particularly harsh disagreements that we can utilize? So, ta erotica, how to love well. This is how we can develop our wisdom. Not romantic love, but to know what to care about. To know what to care about, and to keep what one cares about directed at what is real. Socrates would do things like walk into marketplaces and say, look at all the things I don't need. Or say, how much time did you spend on fixing your hair this morning? Oh, about 20 minutes. How much on fixing yourself? That's pretty offensive. It could be offensive, or it could be insightful.
That's what I try to do.
He might just have
with
a
my
glint in
coffee.
his eye as he says this too. He might just have a smile.
I spend more time on trying to fix myself than my hair.
Yeah,
obviously.
Yeah, no,
That's-
he might just have some kind of Robin Williams charm as he's speaking to you, and this is why
Well,
he's so powerful a figure.
Sometimes, like the statement, like "Look at all these things I don't need," is quite absurd. But
It's funny,
we
it's
enjoy the
playful,
absurd.
it's joyful, and it's also very clever and insightful because he just felt so good to be alive.
It would be like like somebody who can't smell going up and smelling a flower.
Mm-hmm.
You'd be
He's
like,
just
"Why'd you
he's
smell
a
it?"
very present human being, and I think he was very deeply immersed in that joy of being, and he also had a large amount of DGAF going on.
He probably also, well, I would suspect that he learned just as much, if not more, from working with people, going out into the market, doing these things. It's almost like he's experimenting with the people and testing his ideas and his theories to form, or his hypotheses to
All the
form a
time.
better theory.
Yeah. This was his
And
way,
bringing
man.
other people with him and doing
Yeah.
it too, because the people who didn't get offended were the people like, hey, see you tomorrow, man.
Yeah.
Cheers.
Yeah, he was he was bringing in a lot of followers and cadres and people that undertook this philosophical method with him.
Well, and that's why the sophists got after him, because
Yes.
everyone, I won't say everybody, but there was a significant
He
amount
was a
of
threat
people
to
that
certain
were
centers of
waking
power.
up to the bullshit and waking up to not just the bullshit from the sophists, but the bullshit they tell themselves that make them prone to the bullshit of the sophists.
Mm-hmm.
Or those aspiring to be sophists too, because I'm sure there's a lot of people that weren't in the club that wanted to be in the club.
Yeah. People that were just going after power without any moral ideals behind them are very dangerous to society. And so Socrates is like, guys, this is not civilization long term. This is not how we're going to do it. This ain't going to work. So he infused his wisdom into Greece, which helped keep Greece sane for a while, and as sane as it could be for a bunch of crazy human beings. But here we are, still somehow chugging along. So he also Socrates compared himself to a midwife. He knew how to help people give birth to a better self, to be reborn, to draw it out. He knew how to draw it out, so he compared himself to midwife. That's interesting. He also knew how reason and love go together. Frankfurt, author of On Bullshit, also wrote a book called Reasons for Love. Reasons for Love. Two things that we've been taught are antithetical. This separation is one of our greatest follies. We should rationally know what we most care about and what to most care about. That's on point. I agree.
Yeah.
Reasons for love. Yeah. Oh, yeah. I like to use that long-term survival, the long-term comfort and happiness and increased peace and less stress for your family, your community, and your children and their children after, and the broader world for generations to come. That's an ultimately awesome ideal for a human being, for all of human beings to be able to be guided by. And then we need some kind of transcendent, greater ideal than ourselves, but something that compels us. We got to understand there's not just, because survival, man, when it gets hard, we need reasons not to start eating one another.
Yeah.
Basically, like we need very, very compelling reasons.
We also need reasons to not let life get so easy and comfortable that we forget what it is to be hard as well.
Yeah.
It's the balance between, having a good fulfilled life, but not so fulfilled that the next generations don't know why it is good to be fulfilled and like live the simple life or whatever it is.
Yeah.
So
we do need to get back to what's simple, and we can keep all of our gadgets along the way, but we certainly need to learn to be more symbiotic with one another and our environment. Not even to go like all climate change or anything, just like we're killing all the soil. We are killing all the natural water ways that we have access to. We're killing the ocean. Like there's a lot of greed run amok going on, and everyone can, I think, generally agree on that. That sucks. But yeah, this transcendent ideal that compels us so much. How do we get it without some conception of something like God, something that is transcendent, even if it is not personified?
Well, I don't necessarily entirely
ideal of the absolute.
Blame the greed component for all that.
I'm not blaming it for anything. This is just what humans went through.
Hold on.
Yeah, go ahead.
But
You're good.
It's the apathy of the individual participating in it, and that's where we need to work best or work with most is the individual, the normal people.
Yeah, for sure.
Because you can be as greedy as you want, but if nobody wants your product, then
right.
know.
True. Well, we got to infuse love back into this world. We have to. And I think that if we can see that, I love bringing up this Martin Luther King quote on almost every one of my episodes, but Martin Luther King said it so well. God is love, when he quoted the first epistle of John. And he went on to describe how this is seen by all the great world religions, all the great mystery traditions of our past. Ultimately, the supreme highest ideal is love in all of these ancient scriptures across the world. And that insight that the transcendent is somehow composed entirely of what we use this word love for seems to be true to all human cultures and to our actual human experience. And not to try and argue for exactly what is, because God knows it's infinite and it's beyond our comprehension. This existence is absolutely ineffable. I don't know how to explain it. None of us can. The greatest scientist, the greatest religious mind, what have you, they're still arguing to this day over it. But we have to come to some sort of consensus together on what's going to guide us. So I'm thinking of love as this transcendent ideal. We use that in place of the word, or not maybe in place of the word God, but interchangeably with that kind of term. With those kinds of terms that are out there that we already have for the divine or the supreme or the one or whatever.
So
we just start to get to know each other's different religious and spiritual conceptions.
Replace power with love, and instead of it would be with great
quote that's always attributed to Hendrix. You see that?
No, I'm so instead of saying
power.
No, instead of the saying "with great power comes great responsibility," replace power with love. With great love comes great responsibility, and we need responsibility. I think
if you have capacity, if you have the ability, you should be responsive with it. And if we have the ability to make the world a little bit better, then we have the responsibility.
Well, I think every single human being, if you have any iota of consciousness,
need something to do that we can all agree on.
Has the ability to have to be responsible. You have to have response. You have to be able to respond to
We can all be more loving.
Well,
that's easy.
And when you love, there's a nature of responsibility to it. Like, the binding of love within a family. They're responsible to each other. They have responses with each other, but they're also responsible for, say, the well-being of the family. And when you don't have responsibilities, you don't live a good, healthy life. You don't grow. You don't adapt. You don't.
Right.
Responsibility has a negative view.
It does have a negative connotation to us, but not responsibility as in
you have to
do
this.
chores and stuff. But we do got to do our chores.
But it's something you feel compelled to do as well. I feel responsible for this person because I left water out on the ground and didn't put the sign up, so I feel responsible for that. Like we put it on ourselves.
Yeah, if you're able
whether
to
we like
respond
it or not,
in that moment. So some kid that you're walking down the street and some kid on a bike gets clipped by a car, and you're able to respond and help the kid get home safe or whatever, then you do that thing. Yeah. That's just being responsible. It's the same thing with how we may attend together, because we're really good when we actually organize and work together. We agree on the project at innovating new ways of interrelating and being in our societies that are going to be able to function over the long term, that are going to help us through these uncertain times. We have to stabilize ourselves as a species, as civilizations. And a lot of those civilizations maybe to morph into 2.0 versions of themselves.
Well, we have the
Utilizing what's tried and true that we found so far, and where do we need certain upgrades or fixes to counteract the greedy, power-hungry sides.
we don't need to counteract it. We need to incentivize it. Greed. So yet again, buy their products. Force them to change their mode if they want to survive.
That's a
Because the one thing too is like once
step along the way, but there's ways to motivate humans beyond just their self-interest.
When you're dealing with people who are just sucking for power and vacuuming up the whole world and doing that
how do you
stuff,
appeal to sociopaths? Sure.
Yeah. So how do you okay, if you want to make whatever amount of money and be the guy everybody loves and adores, well, you can't keep starving people or making crap products that are killing people or there are ways we
got to depopularize those kinds of
and also how do
activities.
we incentivize people to start having these conversations? That's on the small end, for people to take responsibility that have the ability to respond. To give people
just
the ability to
respond.
Respond.
It and doing it, I think. And more and more and more.
Yeah.
And we get to start
talking
taking
about
responsibility.
When
those of us that are adults now for this world and the next generations to come, it's the name of the fucking game. And we don't need to be slacking in these times because we're here on the precipice, man. It's exciting and it's terrifying at once.
Don't feel afraid
take a
to go
breath
deep.
in. We have the capacity to actually flow in times of crisis. We are able to skirt the precipice and do so with elegance and virtuosity and insane levels of capacity. We've seen it over and over again in so many artists and athletes' demonstrations to us of what can be achieved. So yeah, we're able to dance gracefully through incredibly difficult situations, and that I think is what we're going to be priming ourselves to do now as a species. If we're going to make it through this phase and earn our friggin' butterfly wings, make it out of this cocoon, this phase shift alive.
Mm-hmm.
All right, let's go. How reason and love go together. We should rationally know what we most care about. The shamanic is still in Socrates. He could spend up to 48 hours meditating on his own thoughts. He could drink a lot without getting drunk. He could go into battle in winter without any shoes on his feet. These were all the stories that we hear about Socrates. And he had this divine voice that would speak to him when he was about to do something wrong. He developed a conscience.
Yeah,
and the shamanic has become part of the Socratic. Interesting. One of his followers, Plato, takes Pythagoras and Socrates to advance even more significantly the axial revolution in ancient Greece. And that's the end of episode 4.
Yep. We should take a quick break. Take a break, all that. It's 9 o'clock. That was a really good episode. That's when it felt like it was really starting to pick up for me. Because, these myths and these thinkers are somewhat familiar.
Mm-hmm. First 3 episodes very much first is an intro, the second is following up on that intro, and then he starts painting the picture, and then we start kind of diving in. Yeah. And I love these dives where you get to get very specific on the individuals and their time, because that's so telling.
And one interesting note,
from a great scholar of Platonism and all of that Vervaeke is.
Yeah, so Plato combined Socrates and had his little triangular theorem. The name's
Pythagoras.
Mm-hmm. And you can kind of see his lineage, if you will. There's something called a Platonic solid, which is basically, if you'd say take like the shape of a triangle, the smallest shape that you can make with just triangles. We call that the tetrahedron. And then there's the cube, which is with squares. And then the last Platonic solid is the pentagon. So he was somebody who's combining like the theories of math and shape, and that's applied to the world as it is, but then also the idea of man's relationship with its own ascension and growing. So like he was a scientist as well as a theologian, if you will, both at the same time, and using them to inform each other.
Yes.
You got that agent arena relationship with the going back and forth, but now as like
that deep sense of wonder of what is this transcendence that creates this reality. So as they're breaking apart and trying to understand how reality might fit together, there's remaining in this sense of wonder and awe for it. And yeah, Socrates was wrestling with how some of his fellows, like the natural philosophers, were breaking into we're in that process of breaking things down, but they were losing that transcendent ideal, that sense of how is all of this possible, and how can this guide us to find out more of what is true and good. And same thing with the sophists. They were very skilled at the art of utilizing rhetoric to reach people, if used for good, but also to bullshit people if used with dishonorable intent.
Oh, well, and sometimes you can bullshit people to do good things too.
Sure. Well, good intent versus evil intent, right?
Yeah.
But
when having to tell lies, that's like because
there's white lies. Sure.
Bullshit could be fun. You go to the bar, you bullshit with your buddies. That's
you're a fireman in a building that you're trying to save. The woman doesn't want to leave. She's scrambling because
she can't find her cat.
Can't find her cat.
No, we'll get your cat. Don't worry about your cat.
And maybe someone is trying to get the cat, but it might not be gotten.
Yeah, well, but
you got to get out of here.
Yeah, I got to get you out of here. So come on, let's go.
Yeah, guys. So we're going to take a quick break here. Go ahead and grab yourself some popcorn, have a drink, get yourself a smoke, do the things you got to do. We're going to be right back. Yo, we're back. What's up, everybody?
Hey.
Welcome back to the stream. Before I forget, DJ and I, we play in a band, American Dharma, some of you may know. And we have a show coming up in Winchester, Virginia this Saturday. That's December 3rd. This Saturday, we're going to be rocking with the great Cannon Hill and the mighty Demise. And that's going to be happening at Granny's in Winchester, so check it out. Music starts at 8, I believe. And yeah, we're going to be up there. So you guys should come on out if you can. And then December 16th, this is going to be a Friday. It's going to be at Zen West in Baltimore, Maryland. We're going to be playing with Benny OK, and they're awesome. And that's going to be a great time. Really, really cool venue. Both places are super chill. And you guys should come out. Come have fun. We're going to make music. You can dance.
You can drink. Hit things with sticks, and people will enjoy it.
Yes. It's the time of the year to be merry. And, yeah, watch out for the sticks.
Don't worry, I haven't dropped my sticks. Well, I dropped them at last band practice, but we won't talk about that.
Oh, okay, that's where you're going with it. I'm like,
oh yeah, I'm a drummer. It's the best job ever. You can just beat on.
You didn't hit anybody though. No. It just one of them went flying. That happens. It happens. It's practice.
Poor technique. Ugh. Yeah.
No, you realized what you were doing, I guess, at that moment, and
yeah,
it's what it is, man.
Yeah,
these things happen.
Sometimes you forget to do the pinch, and you just rap, and then it just gets all floppy.
Well, fam, let's jump back in here. So,
episode 5.
Now we're getting to, this is a really good episode. Awakening from the Meaning Crisis by John Vervaeke, episode 5, Plato in the Cave. So, for those of you just tuning in, we reviewed the first 10 episodes of John Vervaeke's Awakening from the Meaning Crisis lecture series. It's incredible. You all should check it out. It's relevant to all of us alive today. It helps us understand why is all this social discord happening, why the civilizational breakdowns looming, and what can we do about it? How may we awaken from this crisis? Not just to be woke, but to continually be awakening. How may we develop wisdom so that we can find out what is most necessary, true, and relevant to put our attention to? All of that. So here's a quote from the episode. Notice that reason and spirituality are not opposed to each other, but are inseparably bound together. Inseparably. It's a tricky word. Reason and spirituality are not opposed to each other here in this story, but are inseparably bound. This is the story of the cave that Plato gives us. Where's my mouse at? Here we are. What makes something sacred is that it's inexhaustible. Okay, this is a quote from Vervaeke. I'll start over. What makes something sacred is that it's an inexhaustible fount of insight and intelligibility that is transformative of us. Vervaeke speaking of Plato's writings, suggesting that we as a society reevaluate what is truly meant by the word sacred. He argues Platonism is the bedrock of Western spirituality. It's how we've come to conceptualize Christian, Judaic, and so on frameworks of understanding reality and interacting with what gives us our values and orientations to life. Plato wondered how people could be so foolish as to kill Socrates, as Athens did. The city that he loved had killed his most beloved teacher.
Yeah, and that's
This immense human
it's a
being.
powerful conundrum. So, so Socrates' conundrum is, how can the gods say I'm the wisest one, but I know I'm not wise. This conundrum now is, how can something I love so much kill another thing that I love so much? Why are we like that? Why do we do this? Why are we so captivated by the shadows on the walls? Why are we so angry? I don't know. It's, I guess the
Deep questions.
yeah, I guess Plato's cave. I think I said this on one of the episodes, was the
How can we become
like
so
a
lost?
brotherly love story dedicated to his teacher.
Mm-hmm. Yes. Yeah, you can tell that Socrates was definitely in mind.
And I think, Socrates was the man walking out of the cave in this story, and then coming back and with this new vision and trying to share it to people. And what did they do? They killed him for it.
That they did. How could they kill Socrates? So Plato creates the first psychological theory in history. His psychology is still currently relevant to us as humans in important ways. He comes up with a theory about why human beings do foolish things. People are clearly beset by inner conflict. Vervaeke uses examples like dieting or procrastination. We know what the right thing to do is, but still struggle to do it and often don't. Plato has an insight and posits the idea that we now find obvious. We have different centers of the psyche, man and monster. Man is the seat of the head of reason. It's the seat of truth, falsity, long-term goals, abstract thoughts, and monster is the seat of appetite. It works in terms of pleasure, pain, immediate goals like food, sustenance, survival, and superficial information.
Yeah, and you could think of that as like the animalistic side,
The
of
animalistic side of us,
or
biological.
the biological side of us, opposed
Drives,
to the reasoning mind.
Yes. Note that monster isn't necessarily bad,
Yeah.
and Plato didn't think so either. Immediate superficial information is crucial in life or death situations. So, of course, the monster isn't necessarily bad, but the monster makes things salient to you, urgent and catchy to your attention. Man, the head, the reasoning capacity, is what you use to understand. So this is how Plato conceptualizes it. Thank you again to Mark Mulvey for these notes. The monster is constantly racing ahead of what we understand. We're perpetually vulnerable. What improves people's chances of losing weight? They join a group. Why? Because you're not just a biological creature, you're also a cultural one. Plato compared this to a lion, since this whole inner conflict we're going through is one between honor and shame. Honor is what you feel you've respected, is what you feel when, honor is when you feel you've been respected by those you consider your peers. Shame is when you feel you failed to gain respect. Guilt is different. Guilt is when you feel you have failed to reach your ideal of what you should be. The lion is where Plato talks about the intermediate, socially agreed upon shared goals between man and monster. The medium-term social goals, not abstract or superficial. And then Plato also represents this lion area as being within the chest, as he did the man in the head. Perhaps
because notions of pride and honor seem to have a cultural associations with the chest, with heart, having courage. Pushing your chest out, this is your thymos, the part of you that is motivated socially. When people are under threats, including inner conflict, anxiety, they tend to be more self-centered and selfish, or more self-interested, more self-focused, survival-oriented. When people are under threat, they tend to become more egocentric, which is adaptive. It does aid survival. I don't have great claws. I don't have great teeth. What a silly structure. I'm teetering around on 2 feet. This is quoting Vervaeke, almost losing my balance. I can't run quickly, so describing the human body. Everyone can see me from a long distance because I'm towering above the grass. My throat and vital organs are nicely exposed for any predator. This is a bad makeup. But you know what I can do? I can get together with a bunch of other human beings and we can get some pointy sticks and some dogs and we can kill everything on the planet. It's because we got this forebrain. Phew. Yeah, did we get powerful because of that cultural capacity that we have. Our ability to work together has always been adaptive. Hyperbolic discounting, temporal discounting. The more you're discounting, the less salient something is, the less it stands out for you. Hyperbolic. The less it grabs your attention. This is why the immediate superficial things grab our attention more and distract us so much and can override the man. Why do we have this? Because technically, the less probable an event is, the less attention you should give it. This makes logical sense and is adaptive. Otherwise, you'd be overwhelmed by all the possibilities.
Yeah, there's infinitely too many things that could possibly go on or are
in our field of awareness at any time.
Yeah, and we have to do something about it or else
Yeah.
we'd freeze up and not be able to do anything.
Mm-hmm. So we have to get good at finding out what is relevant out of all of this information very quickly.
Well, using maybe your monster as a beast of burden opposed to something that's going to consume you. You know, you can use, you know, the ox monster to plow fields and propagate vegetation, if you know, for metaphor. Or
yeah, because here we learn about the idea of you got to tame the monster, basically.
Yeah, and well, if the monster is what makes things salient, then say like a hunting dog, a dog can point and then make you aware to there's a duck.
Or is it ally with the monster to tame the lion?
Yeah, and the tamed lion is the what would you call it? The or the metaphor for the man and the monster in balance with each other. Mm-hmm. So the domesticated monster, if you will.
Right.
And you know, they're noble creatures and all that stuff. I don't think it's a coincidence that even in places that didn't have freaking lions still had, you know, lions as being, you know, some royal thing, or you know, like you see it on coats of arms and theme. Stuff like that.
I don't even know where my Part 5 notes are. I never caught up on that.
Oh no.
Well, guide us here, Mark.
But
this is hopeful, though. We're going to get into that. The Platonic division here. I can see it coming up. So highly anxious people find things salient that they shouldn't. They find low probability things too salient. Yes.
That's the monster getting one over on you.
Right.
And
yeah, you're really good at... These people can find useful places in society. You're really good at looking at a whole range of possibilities of what could happen and trying to analyze all these different potential outcomes. But you can get lost in that place.
Well, that's why you need
and then you become excessively wound up. Yeah, it's just anxious.
That's where you have a distributed cognitive network. You know, you have some people that are the all the possibilities people, and then you got the people who crunch down the numbers into more usable information. Then other people can take that and then figure out what's more.
Have a good instinct for where the quick decisions need to be made.
And not to use the homuncular fallacy, but I think, you know, you can see your brain doing that to a certain extent. You know, your eye sees a ridiculous amount more information than your brain allows you to comprehend, and your brain takes in more information than it allows you to comprehend.
Right.
The monster takes
Yes, it does. So the very machinery that makes you adaptive is also the machinery that makes you prey to
Yeah.
self-deception, self-destructive behavior. You can't throw this adaptive machinery away or you'll be riddled with anxiety. But if you keep it, you'll smoke the cigarette, you'll eat the cake, and do all the things that appear to have low immediate term consequences. So this Platonic division is echoed later by Freud in his 3 layers of human psyche: superego, ego, and id. And later still with scientific descriptions of reptilian brain, mammal brain, neocortex. We keep rediscovering these Platonic divisions. Man can learn, and the lion can be trained. That's it, the lion can be trained. Using the Socratic method, i.e. dialogue, man can train the lion, that lion-hearted side. Together they can contain the monster and reduce as much as possible the inner conflict, which in turn makes you, 1, less egocentric, and 2, puts you more in touch with reality. Wow, that's crazy that basically the idea is man is making an alliance with the lion, this metaphor for the most powerful predator in the entire animal kingdom, and is using that alliance with this trained lion. It's actually overcame and trained the lion. With this level of human capacity, now it sets its attention upon its own self, its own inner conflicts, the monster within. That's awesome. That's a really cool, I like the story.
And the monster serves a
that
purpose as well. It's not just this arbitrary thing that's, under the bridge that just eats children for no reason. Or billy goats in the billy goat's grunt, but it
serves a function.
The monster does serve a function, and its function, like you said, is to show you what is immediately salient, and it's a pure survival instinct. It is one of our baser instinct, our beast instinct, our animalistic instinct. It's the thing that keeps you alive, and the rational man, if you will, has to reason with this monster and make reason of what this monster is providing to be salient. Is it actually salient or is it not? So, you don't want to always pay attention to the barking dog, but when your dog barks in the middle of the night, you're like, oh, somebody's here. Pay attention. But you don't want your dog to be an overly barky dog, because then you don't know the actual dangers that are coming your way. You've convinced yourself of something else. You're like, oh, he's always barking at something, but you've got somebody breaking into your garage or something,
Yeah.
So train that monster to only bark when it's a problem, which means you have to teach it what are these problems that you find, the rational mind finds to be
strong-hearted side of yourself
for
can train
real.
this dog. Can train this dog wisely, though. Has the capacity.
Well, it's
to
interesting
do so.
that we've formed the relationship with dogs that we have.
Dude, it's so cool.
It's like
we've been around each other for so long. They've been around us. They were the wolves that were maybe the least aggressive of the pack, that would be willing to get closest enough to us to try and feed off of our stuff and not mind us, as long as we weren't like jerking and doing anything to them or moving around, any sudden movements. We learned how to be when they came around, because we realized they were picking off the rats and other things that were getting in the way sometimes, or whatever it was. That the smoke of the meat, the smell of the meat traveling was bringing them close. So they were probably interacting on some level, eating rats and getting close to the camps and getting into their food. And gradually we took the initiative to try and train some of them, and we started to train them. They became like us. Like, dogs don't need to look at each other's eyes to know what each other's looking at. Generally, they can just tell by the direction the head of the other dog is facing. But dogs know how to read where humans are looking by looking at the whites of our eyes, because you don't normally see the whites of dogs' eyes. This capacity they developed with their long-term association with us. And it's only for us that they have this capacity. But you can train a dog well enough to where when you look at what you're telling it to go fetch, it knows what it's supposed to go fetch. We've had a long relationship with them, and they've taught us a lot.
And we've had
well. I mean, they're the most unconditionally loving. When you treat them with love and you guide them and raise them well.
And
They're the most unconditionally loving and loyal creatures.
We were training and raising dogs long before this concept of the man training the beast and then becoming the lion.
Yeah.
Long before we had this,
Training
idea,
the lion.
we were already doing it.
Dude, yeah.
But in the,
No doubt. And we have gotten to the point where we train lions, too. That's friggin' nuts. And we put them on shows in the circus, man. How degrading. But that's the power
man, now
that
I
we
see.
have to wield. Like, this is where we're able to respond. We got to be responsible with our powers. Fucking making lions be caged and go and do stupid tricks and dances.
Then you got
their life experience.
You got people who have
That's
like mountain
dumb.
lions and cheetahs and like panthers. Like I follow some people and they love that animal and that animal loves them. But you watch, there's certain relationships they have to have. Like I am cheetah and I am puma. So Gerda and Messi, these they are not house cats, but they're kind of house cats. Like they can't survive in the wild. And in Russia, you can have a freaking mountain lion and a cheetah easier than
apparently
you can
Texas
have here.
too.
Hey, well, but
More tigers in Texas than the natural world.
well, one of the stories that archetypical stories that we have is the hero taming the beast. It's no coincidence, it's something that's in the nature of us to want to overcome this, the beast, and of course we would apply it to our own mental state. That's what we do.
The ultimate thing that Earth's created that lives as Earth, extended out into the environment.
Yeah. And
we are Earthlings.
And extended inward too. The way we think of the universe is directly affected by how we interact and how the universe actually is.
Yeah, we get to write this
too.
story, man. We get to write this story. And we humans are the pinnacle on this planet, so that gives us the great response ability.
Yeah, the ability
to respond. And what a great honor. Like, what a we can take responsibility as a compliment.
Sure.
You actually have the capacity to respond.
You have the ability.
And to change the outcome of this story in any way that you see fit. As a species, if you put your minds to it, you can do it. We've proven it over and again to ourselves. Look at what we've created. I mean, does that have to, I don't have to reference it all, but, satellites and smartphones and all of that. And the fact that we're live streaming right now, human capacity is amazing. So what are we going to do with this great responsibility? We've got to be the stewards this world needs. And we got to steward with love and wisdom. And we need to redevelop wisdom schools and popularize them and start to plant them all over the world.
Just start doing it.
Just start doing it.
Just start trying to find wisdom. Talk with other people. Or
check out John Vervaeke's Awakening from the Meaning Crisis.
And it's not something find wisdom like it's this thing that you can find and possess, but it's like, find the virtual components and create this mechanism that we call wisdom.
Something we can all do together.
Wisdom isn't passive; it's active. It does
it's
things.
A calling, man. It's a calling for our times too, and it's a calling to our higher capacities.
Well, we've definitely forgotten about our monster, and definitely let our monster have its way with us. Of late. And well, no wonder you see so many monsters that
it's
are doing
a very
horrific
limited
things
feeling
now.
capacity. We can be so much more.
Yeah, yeah.
We have this great capacity,
and we don't have to completely get rid of it either.
Virtue.
This idea of like, well, you just got to get rid of the bad things. It's like, no, those bad things.
You got to incorporate the impulses in a healthy way.
Yeah.
In a way that you know is going to be good for one and all. Mm-hmm. And if we keep being guided by that simple unconditionality, that the consideration, the deep consideration, that orientation to life that love itself gives us. So love as an orientation, not as just some emotion, and encompasses so many emotions, but as an actual orientation. It's a way of being for us as humans to operate through. It's a love of life. It's that sense of wonder that for those things that you're greatly interested in when you light up, and that's a state that we can live in all the time, increasingly so. It can be cultivated. So we have all of these practices that we've developed: mindfulness, meditation, and contemplation, and so on. And this is what John Vervaeke is also teaching us about in this series. He rubs shoulders with many greats, and he's learned from many greats, and he's collated a masterwork lecture series here that's too long for any one academic school, but it also is meant for all of humanity.
Mm-hmm.
It's awesome. Yeah, so
let's get back into this.
Let's kick it. So back into it. This Platonic division is echoed by Freud and his 3 layers of human psyche: superego, ego, and id. We went through this. So man can learn, the lion can be trained, and the lion and the man together can address the monster, reduce the inner conflict. Less egocentric, puts you more in touch with reality. This then makes you better at picking up real patterns in the world. So this is feeding back in on itself. A skill that then you can apply on yourself. Better knowledge of yourself means you can better teach the man, which better trains the lion, so on and so forth, etc., etc. Keeps feeding in on itself. Plato's famous myth or parable of the cave is a way of talking about all of this. Notice how self-transformation and getting more in contact with the world are interconnected. It's participatory knowing. I have to change myself in order to see the world, and then the world changes so I can change myself. And the world discloses itself in a new way now, and so on and so forth. I'm omitting here, these are Mark's notes, Vervaeke's full description of Plato's parable, since it's fairly well known and numerous summaries are available. However,
So a quick summary. Bunch of guys sitting in a cave, looking at a wall. There's shadows cast upon it by a bunch of other guys that are standing in front of a fire with some cutouts. Somebody decides to get up and weasel his way out and around and past the fire, and has this ongoing enlightenment process as he's crawling out of the hole, where he becomes blind, and it takes him a minute to reacclimate just to the dim light of the tunnel, and then eventually out, and then expanding and being, after going through horrific, I can't see anything, then seeing what the world is, and then goes back into the hole to tell his buddies, can't see nothing, completely blind, bumbling around like a crazy madman.
Yeah, his eyes haven't readjusted.
And then trying to tell everybody about something that...
About this. There's this whole infinite expanse out there, and it's beautiful, and there's this light. There's an ultimate light that's up high up, and you don't have the word for sky. He's probably sounding mad to everyone in there, because they've lived their whole lives in this cave.
They've only seen shadows upon a wall
that were being cast by puppets or something on the wall. They have not seen actual reality. So first they see the smoke or the fire that's casting the shadows, and then they make their way out of the tunnel, and they see this amazing thing. He shows other ones. They come back, and then they try and free the others, and then they kill them, basically, is the story.
Yeah. But that's you can relate to that. How many times have you really learned something that is core fundamental to what you feel is reality, and then you go back and try to explain it to somebody, and you just sound like a bumbling lunatic, and you're just like, no, like I swear, like it's something, no, like
Sure.
it's really a thing, and just to get ridiculed for it.
Is a common experience.
But there might be a person who might come with you and
or ultimately killed, like his boy Socrates was. Yeah. But
so,
no, also you're gonna have a lot of people that are gonna
Sure.
come with you.
First, you got to get them to look away from the wall, and
Yes.
angle themselves 90 degrees, so now the wall and also the fire that was behind them
and with
is in
wisdom, and somehow find a way to compel them away from that direction and help them through the crazy realization of what the world actually is from this new vantage point, with all of this new information. So Plato's famous myth, it's a way of talking about all of this. Notice how self-transformation and getting more in contact with the world are interconnected. It's participatory knowing. I have to change myself in order to see the world, and then the world changes. So I change myself, the world discloses, so on. So, clearly enlightenment is not just an Eastern idea. This is a myth of enlightenment, of coming into the light. He's drawn towards this light at the end of the cave. He comes out as this blinding light that is impossible. The Greek word for this ascent is anagage, this coming up out of the tunnel of the darkness. Plato is describing an account of how you can make your lives rationally more meaningful. You can become more fully alive and at peace in conjunction with you becoming more and more in contact with the real patterns that make sense of reality. This is what Plato calls wisdom, a fullness of being. It's also the same myth as the one depicted in The Matrix. This is a perennial myth of wisdom. This is a story that we've told over and over and over again for a long time. Notice that reason and spirituality are not opposed to each other here, but are inseparably bound together. Neo becomes one with everything at the end.
One.
He becomes the one at the end. And now he's in this super high state of flow, and he knows exactly he's basically transcendent. He's omnipresent. So he just effortlessly goes through every single one of the agents at that point. What was once a challenge all of a sudden became effortless.
Yeah. Oh boy.
The structural functional organization, this that we learned from Vervaeke, that makes the whole greater than the sum of its parts. How does this thing structurally and functionally organize to make itself a chair, for instance? It's why you can just glue random feathers together in the shape of wings and add feet and a beak and a body and tape it together and call it a bird, but birdness emerges out of how a specific structure actually functions. Germans have a word for this, Gestalt. It's, for the Greeks, it's logos. You have some sense of what a bird is, what its logo is, but if asked what a bird is, you can't really say. Your grasp of what a bird is intuitive. Logos isn't just how a form is integrated, it's how your mind can be integrated with it.
Yeah, and it's not necessarily the feature list has wings, has beak, has feathers, it's yes, a set of features, but also what does it do? What does all of that all together do? And then that is bird.
Yeah, the birdness of a bird.
Yeah. Because there's a bunch of different kinds of birds that I can say bird, and you have enough of an the structural functional organization of what bird is to kind of create one in your mind and think, oh, okay,
You
bird.
know what a bird actually is.
Or the big bird.
Someone can't just stick a bunch of
Ground
feathers together and say
bird.
that's a bird. You're like,
Yeah.
nah, that's not a bird, man.
Yeah. Or even, like
Bird's gotta be able to fly.
a flying squirrel. Also kind of flies.
Yeah.
Or a
bird,
bat.
though.
Bat is not bird.
No.
Bird has birdness. Bat has batness. They both fly. They both have wings. They
Yeah,
both
no,
eat
bat's like
insects
a
and whatever,
mouse.
but
Mouse with wings or a rat with wings.
yes, a bat is more has more mouseness than it does birdness. Therefore,
Sure,
we call it
yeah.
bat.
Bats are weird.
Well, and you could say you could have all the accreditations and titles and everything like that, but if you don't actually do what those titles and all those things are, you got the feature list, but you don't have it all. You're the some feathers and some wings stuck to a block of wood. So there
But
is
the overall picture, the overall thing, the gestalt of it, the logos of it,
Well,
the greater, deeper sense of it.
there seems to be a doing aspect, like an active doing aspect to the structural functional organization.
Right.
The chair does something. If it does something else, now it's something else. The chair can be a table if you turn around and put something on it.
It can be.
Yeah.
It can be a table. It can be, it can be a stool. It can be a lot of different things.
Or it can
depending
just
on how you use
be
it. How
in the way.
You need to conceptualize it in that moment.
Yeah.
It depends on what you're looking for and what you need to do what you're trying to do in that moment. Yeah, it's funny. The brain will think in that way, and it'll see the chair now as a stool or as a table or as whatever it needs it to be. So yeah.
So I think that it's more an
We're
active.
almost at the end of this one. You have some sense of what a bird is, what its logos is, but if asked what a bird is, you can't really say. Your grasp of what a bird is intuitive. Logos isn't just how a form is integrated, it's how your mind can be integrated with it.
It's almost like you'll know it when you see it.
Yes.
You can't quite describe completely.
Yeah,
but
because it's
you'll know
not
it
just
when
how
see
you know
it.
something, it's also the pattern of what makes it be what it is. It's the structural functional organization of it. It's how the things fit together and actually create birdness. When you really know something, you can conform to it. You can become like it in some important way.
So more of
It's like an ideal, if conforming to the ideal of virtue, which we'll learn about here in forthcoming episode.
And becoming more of a craftsman of sorts, opposed to just explaining it. You know, like the guy who makes the chair really knows what it is to be the chair, to make the chair, to do the chair.
Yeah. Yeah, so he can conform to that ideal chair potential when he's creating with more capacity, because he just more fully knows the thing.
And you'd call somebody like that a master, and it's interesting that, you know, we use in Christianity,
We say masterful,
or we say, like, you know, like the God is the master of all things.
Of all things, yeah.
As in, God can form itself and create the
like
thing.
An artistic kind of mastery.
Yeah.
Orchestrate.
God knows the things because God is the things. And
structural
builds the things.
Functional organization is what makes the whole greater than the sum of its parts.
Yeah.
So when you're looking for the structural functional organization of a universe as a whole, it's hard to conceptualize it without a generative, omnipresent / destructive divine being, or some absolute, always has been, always will be, force of some sort that is all one, that everything else is a part of.
Yep, and you may not be able to explain it, but you know it when you see it.
That's the thing. Yeah, and that we've had wisdom schools and religious systems trying to,
well, dude, you have a spiritual
express
encounter
and inspire and battle over for thousands of years.
Yeah, you can't explain your spiritual encounter, but if somebody else who has one, they know what it feels like.
And it's funny, right? That's true. We have so many cases of that cross-culturally, all over the world. It's true. I forgot what I was going to say there. I had some inspiring thing that came to me there. Oh, well, it'll maybe come back later on. I like this idea of having a transcendent ideal for us as human beings, and to be in a state of wonder. The structural, functional organization of the universe. What is that?
Yeah.
That is a question. That is a wonder. We haven't ever figured it out. We've tried to describe God, and we've been talking about God thousands of different ways. But it's funny, we always do come back to that root of love.
But our conception of God seems to be expanding as we do this as well. So, like, you know, if I believe in a generative, regenerative kind of concept of God.
The thing that Christians are pointing to is the same thing that the Buddhists were pointing to, that the Hindus were pointing to.
That all the way back to the pagans who didn't have, the concept of a, you know, I don't know, monotheistic or pantheistic, but it was just nature. The nature is God's. You pay homage to the great oaks because it's the greatest, biggest thing in your area. You develop your worshipful practices that way, and that was, you know, the base understanding of our concept of God. And then you move it up into, well, now there's a God of the great forests, and the God of this,
but this idea of this spirit
river, or and then it expands up to now there's set gods that are like, you know, you can say, like, you know, nature is in one God, the ocean is in another God, the rage of man is in another God, and then you get to the point, okay, now gods are above in moral authority, and there's a hierarchy of gods, and then it gets to the point of a monotheistic God. There is the one thing, the indescribable, the thing that is above all things forever, always, because no matter how big you make it, it always gets bigger.
Right.
And it's like our conception of God is evolving with our ability to come to grasp with larger and larger and larger and larger
sets of information
that
we're kind of building upon.
A larger universe, if you will. Like, you know, our universe of understanding has become so much larger than it was 2,000 years ago, than it was 20,000 years ago, than it was, and that increases the concept of God. If God is the, you know, the highest ultimate thing, direction, if you will, to shoot towards, and I like to think of that as positive and good.
If it gives us something to aspire towards, a higher sense and encapsulation and embodiment of love, and we find that this is the one thing that all the great wisdom schools and religions seem to agree upon, is the supreme unifying principle of life itself. This thing that we call love, God and love being synonymous. I think this is a chord. It's a true chord that we can all agree on, that we can use as a guide stone. and we can further explicate and develop our conceptualization of this higher transcendence, but maybe we're at a point to where we can, considering the implications, the looming myriad existential crises our species faces, the many challenges that face us in the near future that we need to be able to overcome, and we're not going to be able to unless many more of us are working together. And perhaps these can be our compass as well.
Yeah, and then, you know, the negative, horrible, awful things that we do and that are done to us as humans, we're doing this to get over it. Ultimately, we are our last greatest challenge. We rival nature at this point. You know, like
we are nature, but we rival every aspect of nature on this planet.
So now we have to be the thing that is pushing us to evolve.
We have
the
to
next
be
thing
stewards.
To get past. So we just need to get over ourselves, guys. It's fine.
Well, it's exciting to realize that we are interconnected with everything and everyone around us. We are this one thing that exists as many at once, and we don't know why that is happening, but we get to take part in it together. And what a wonder, what an exciting thing to be a part of.
No, we're the people alive right now are, you know, living in the rarest times, which is right now, with the ability to transfer information like we do, with this, you know, this sensibility and idea that people have a right to freedom to be able to like speak their mind, and not just in, you know, the United States. The pinnacle goal for any developing country is, you know, to be able to state what they want openly, to be able to talk, to be able to think with each other. We
just want to further optimize our systems of self-governance,
and that's a new concept
in
though,
the best
because,
ways
like,
possible
to be
for the most,
for people to be free, and, you know, like, this idea of freedom too, to be able to be free to pursue these things, is very new. Very new.
And this is a turbulent time. Like, so we're in a time of reevaluation, big time. Everything's thrown up into the air, right? Like, every single belief system of old is being tested and challenged.
Yeah, and now we're at a point in time where we have so much, but it's not fulfilling.
Every aspect of our association with reality is being challenged.
Yeah, it's like, you're free to have whatever you want. Well, crap, what do I want?
It's a question.
It's huge. Yeah. We've never been there in, like, to have so many options of what to have thrown in front of us. This is rare.
And we're culturally oriented, and we've become so disconnected. I was visiting with my mother and grandmother just last night and talking with them about this. Like, we've all, you know, in our modern times here in the States, and I don't know how much it's like this and all over, you know, the rest of the world, but I know it's become common in industrialized centers where people become separated from their families.
Sure.
And communities aren't as close as they were just 50 to 100 years ago. And we are much more optimal as societies when we're closely connected culturally and within our communities and within our families and within our friendships. And we've been bullshitted for so long in recent times, like the last 100 years in particular, ever since the advent of what became known as public relations, but the systemized methodology of psychological operations on mass numbers of people for the benefit of wealthy interests or powerful government interests. So commercial, commerce, and government started to use psychological methods that Freud was picking up on, like Edward Bernays, his nephew, who was the guy that basically invented modern day PR. Bullshit art, basically. The art of priming our primal urges to sell us shit that we don't need.
But to not give...
And so it's just the use of... So there's nothing wrong, I think, with the market in general. It's how we as human beings use it, and how can we as human beings become more generally acting from places of honor and nobility and virtue.
So not to give the devil too much due, but say like, the medical or psychological experimentation that we've done on ourselves the past 100 or so years. A lot of times, yeah, there was a lot of awful, horrible mass manipulation of people to do things, but now we're at a point right now where we can read about that, we can learn about it, we can see the insights behind that, and know how we can be manipulated. So we're, even though there was a lot of bullshit that went on, we can use it in hindsight.
Yeah, for sure.
And there's a lot of moral issues too, like when it comes to like, medical and psychological experimentation. And weird fact about me, I find that stuff really fascinating, and like serial killers and, crazy evil doctors and stuff like that. But I don't say we should go out and do things like that, but the information is there, and you can arm yourself against
people
the
are
bullshit.
fascinated with like crime and murder mysteries and stuff like that. And I think all of that attraction to that is us realizing biologically as a species that we're basically tuned to survival, so we're attracted to playing through, acting out scary situations because they're fun and exciting when you're in a safe place, but it's also a way to interact with potentially dangerous moments.
Well, and say like, like looking into, old research, like, the psychological studies of like twin studies and other, stuff like that, and how we figured out that babies need to be touched in order to like live through. A lot of bad stuff really happened. It'd almost be kind of like a screw you to all the people that were treated so horribly, not to use the useful parts, and then the other useful parts, which is don't ever do that again. Hold yourself to a higher standard, and hold the people that are doing this stuff to a higher standard. That's the other thing we learned. We're like, what is really, really wrong?
Well, I think
like that's a hard lesson that we learned in these. Dude, we dropped a nuke, and then we dropped two, and then then we realized that's really bad. Let's
giant
not do
pharma
that.
corporations start opioid epidemics.
Well, and then what India had to deal with. Monsanto came in. We're like, we got a seed that will grow in the stuff if you put it in the ground, but then they put the stuff in the ground and it ruined the soil. Well, this is known though. You can go on Wikipedia and look this up.
But it's all true, and it's disappointing, but we can definitely
learn though.
Turn to the dark side.
Well, even
we got to check ourselves
like
before we regularly wreck ourselves.
Yeah,
as
the
a
Dust
species.
Bowl, when we tilled up all the grasslands and kept doing it and kept doing it and kept doing it, and then, well, we did it to ourselves. We learned.
So how do we do this beyond a broader cultural conversation? And so we've got to get past the fighting, debating part with our family and friends, and just be like, okay, how do we figure this out together? What do you understand? What do you feel about these different subjects of immediate interest to us together here in our local communities or our local families? And okay, if we're talking about America at Thanksgiving or in the holidays coming now, we're already past Thanksgiving, but we're in that time of year where everyone talks about this theme of
the winter feasting festivals.
These are good times for us to hash these things out, but we can take orientation, a posture in the way that we utilize our rhetoric and our speech to picture ourselves side by side trying to figure it out. So, okay, how do we understand this? How do we figure this out together? How do we determine what is true? We got to be able to challenge. We got to be able to challenge ourselves by looking at other sides of information, so we can try to find ways of healthfully encouraging that.
Yeah,
around us.
How do we do this with the least amount of harm? Because some realizations do hurt.
Yeah.
Like we're growing creatures, like the spiel I just said. We do but how do we share this with the least amount of harm? How do you tell somebody that somebody they love just died? That's something that's close to us, because it's like, we've thought about this. It's like, how do you break the news? How do you do that? Well, doctors have learned certain techniques in order to do that because they've dealt with it. But how do we breach, or how do we talk about these things with people without getting them into the panic, fear mode?
Fight or flight mode.
Because that is harmful, like in the sense of,
without
it harms the
ego,
process
and bringing up the survival sense. Because right now the PR has everybody tuned that when it comes to anything political, we have all of our antenna up for survival.
Yeah.
We really are not in a mode of deep consideration and trying to mutually find conciliation and understanding together. You're really in a mode of self-defense and offense, and I've got to prove my point. You got to understand this is true, and everyone that's on this side that believes this thing is stupid, and we get very blurry in our vision. We do that because we're amping ourselves up for potential violence. We disagree so wholeheartedly that we're willing to totally separate from the other and turn on our fellow human being and use force of violence, actual physical bodily
stuff that
violence.
we've learned within the past 100 or so years that we should
with the weapons
not
that we
forget.
have now, capacities we have now,
And
not just the nukes, but the bio and chem stuff that is soon going to be accessible within 5 years, just to anybody with a functional lab.
Well, I
It's
mean,
going to be able to do earth decimating stuff, and that's coming with the new CRISPR tech that's coming up very soon. It's all frightful. Like, very quickly, human beings have to tune in to one another. That's the actual fact of the matter. That's where we're at right now. The capacities we have to destroy ourselves are too great. The capacities for small groups of nihilists to get together and do extremely devastating things are going to become increasingly easy with technological improvement that's coming in very short time.
well, I guess we can maybe use some of the knowledge of, like, how the Mad Men, the Madison Avenue ad men.
I just went Daniel Schmachtenberger.
Yeah, but
Without also adding, sorry to cut you off there, without also adding that we are able. So go on, sorry, brother.
yeah, well, we know techniques in order to make things super salient, like the Madison Avenue ad men. They did it to a point where they could sell anything to anybody. Now that we know that, we can use those techniques, the bullshit techniques, if you will, to actually intentionally do things that are good. And I don't mean this in like a lying kind of way. I mean it, how do you make something that's good for you super salient? Well, how do you make food, vegetables that normally don't taste very good but are really good for you, super good? Where you're
TLC,
like,
baby. Farmers markets can start having people go door to door with their fruits and vegetables so that people can eat on their doorstep and try it out, and then start ordering from them weekly deliveries. And there's a lot of communities starting to do that.
Okay,
there's
so
a lot of ways
not to go too far into the vegetables, but my point.
Just but that's great. I like that.
But well, one way I've seen
Intentionality.
people do it is you have things like merch, shirts that say things on them.
Mm-hmm.
So that's one way to make it salient, is like an actual product that you can sell to somebody. But another way to do it is to have events that
Draw
build
people
hype
out. Yeah.
in a certain way,
Yeah.
and you can also then cross network into, like, the artist realm, the music realm, other things like that. And I think at least the kind of person I am and what I'm good at, that's my realm of things, is like creating an environment that is, looks cool, sounds cool. I'm a musician, but I also like to make things look good on a shoestring budget. So creating events that build hype, because like, say, like Comic-Con, people, they dress up and do their thing, but it's really the hype of the experience of the event. And I think if we can, like, this podcast is an event. And the more it becomes more successful, the hype gets bigger for it.
Sure.
And watching people who go to clinics and not interviews, but places where people go to talk about that's event. How do we make that? And I'm not saying it's boring, but how do we make that not boring for people who aren't initiated? How do you make it exciting for people who aren't initiated?
Oh God, yeah.
These are things to think about, because like learning this stuff and learning to find wisdom is the first step, is the important step. But then how do you ensnare other people? Well, Socrates walked around and went into the market and said crazy things like, "Oh, look at all this stuff I don't need," and started interacting, and then the event was getting together. But the holiday celebrations are also events where we do things. So
Philosophy,
we needed like a
together again.
ritualized events.
Ritualized events coming
and
back,
not
and
like,
you see people
but-
reach into these things naturally too.
Sure, yeah.
They will start to recapitulate themselves
And parties that aren't
slightly new and upgraded forms. Each revolution through. We're learning deep stuff really fast right now as a species. It's a turbulent time, guys, but we can surf this wave, and you're going to see it increasingly as we become more self-reflective and more, not to be cliche, but loving towards our neighbors, genuinely here for one another within our families, and working in our lives with the intention to help humans unite and become more symbiotic and be able to ride out the potentially coming turbulent storms.
Oh, the storm is
that's
already
something
here.
that we can all plug into in all kinds of beautiful small ways in our lives, just
Sure.
by creating a more enriched
Well, it's not big, huge,
state of being.
grand events
through-
that happen that make up this universe.
It's
a
it's our
bunch of
own
tiny
inner
little
revolutions
discrete,
that become larger communal revolutions that we share in philosophical fellowship. And then I like that idea of building the hype of events. And because these
Oh,
are
you
the
don't
ways
wanna
of getting
miss
down
this,
into
guys.
because we got to get
You know,
more and
like-
more down into the nitty gritty of how do we help popularize this in our culture again, regardless of one's religious or political affiliation.
Yeah.
There is an intentionality that you see a lot of people just naturally fall into. They just kind of skirt above this bullshit that's going on around us, and they're just like, they're loving in a very genuine and authentic way. They're doing things, or they're very keyed into really cool movements that are exciting, that give you a sense of hope, that are very life enriching and meaningful to be a part of and to witness. And it's, I think that's the name of the game right now. So we got to figure out, like,
Well,
we got to bring back what's hip
yeah, and
for real.
It shouldn't
like
be.
what and continue on that idea of, okay, what is the most.
Well, I think what's hip right now is places where people can actually get together and talk together, because
There's a need
just
for that,
talking
right?
over
Yeah.
online and all this stuff isn't working for us anymore. And I can feel like people have been so separated from COVID, like, the chance if they can sit down and talk with somebody, and it's like, it's a lot. And I think the actually bringing everything back and using these technologies that we have now to actually bring us back to each
Start
other
with
in
one,
person.
one friend,
Yeah.
one friend, and then build it up to two maybe, and just let it grow. If you feel that it can actually grow, let it grow.
Find a good coffee shop and take it over, and just show up on a day and
Test out and find ways of talking about these kinds of things that
Don't
we
be
somehow always found ourselves getting into in our younger years. Those questioning when you're hanging out with your friends and you have enough time to talk for a long time, and somehow it gets onto these really deep life subjects. And
don't be
those deep
afraid to go deep.
questions,
That's
we should, yeah.
It seems like a lot of times
We should allow ourselves
we are
more chances to do that.
we're skirting the depths and not wanting to go deep, and there's nothing really to be afraid of.
You lose a sense of where you're at. You lose a sense of orientation, and
Yeah, but you're floating
you're
there.
a cosmic being floating here in the midst of an infinite galaxy, in the midst of more infinite universe.
And don't be afraid to broach the deep either, because like a lot of people want to go deep but don't necessarily have the personality type to be like, hey, like this, this thing that we're in, but they have the personality type to be like, well, okay, you're in there, yeah, I'm gonna go over there, okay, and then they go in.
Trust that we have the potential, because we've proven it 1,000 times over to one another and our wider species and our survival on this planet long term. We've proven our capacity, and we just have to ratchet up that capacity for the good, for the love of one and all together, and popularize that quick, get down with it, and see where it takes us. But really commit to it and find something that you're able to attend to, because not to be preachy, not to be teachy, but this is the great calling. You don't have to. You can joyfully support these loving movements around the world and still be a part of them in your own daily way in life.
Well, hey,
And
as long
we're all invited into this, though.
if
That's
it just helps one person, like if it just helps you,
there's a
invisible
potential.
viewer,
There's
just
a slim
you,
chance
well,
we can make it. We have the internet.
that's
We have
worth
the
it.
ability to rapidly disseminate information and rapidly educate and inform one another and inspire one another. So I think that, and I see a lot of people, of course, we naturally are. We want to survive. You're seeing people come out of the woodwork all over the place that are very inspiring, very uplifting.
we don't want to
very
just
powerful
survive.
artists.
We want to thrive.
We want to thrive.
And
We have that capacity. We are able, and to help other life thrive.
well, yeah,
And then we've earned our way off. Then we've earned our right to be able to perhaps responsibly explore and steward after other life that we come into in the universe.
well,
And
we've
interact positively, constructively with.
Once
as
we've
much as possible.
developed the complete ability to respond to all of this, then perhaps we'll develop the ability to respond to other, like, going to other planets and other things like that. So the ability to respond to.
It feels like it's like a stopgap that the universe has built in.
Yeah, if you can't get off your own rock, like
If you
if you can't get these past,
we don't want you going and genociding other planets.
or we don't want you to go other planets and then like turn into some weird
hard.
mutant,
You're gonna have to
crazy,
learn to
horrible,
actually be symbiotic with one
Yeah.
another. And if you get to the point of technological complexity and capacity that you can kill yourself and your host planet, it's very likely that you're dangerous to yourself.
That's the first step, though. The ability to kill yourself and your host planet is the first step to gaining the wisdom of how to get off.
Sure. The capacity.
Because then your
and the
ability
wisdom.
to bullshit yourself, to kill your own self. We're like,
We are there. What a trippy time to be alive in, as we funky hominids speaking.
yeah.
We're such strange apes. Like, we stopped growing fur on most of ourselves, but we still have, like, you got a bunch of fur sprouting out the top of your head, like
I'm pretty fuzzy.
a broccoli.
Yeah.
And we got these little noses, and we got these really interesting eyes, like side by side, that are really good at aiming. We're very goal driven. It's like our brain has conformed to how we see, which helps us. We stand up tall so we can see far, but we are certainly totally exposed. All of our vital organs are exposed. Our flesh is not thick. It's not thick hide. It's not shielded in any way naturally.
Well,
but we do shield it because we're smart and we're tool using animals, and then suddenly we took over the world because we're culturally adaptive. We actually team up together and use sticks. We don't just use sticks. We team up and we strategically use sticks and train dogs, and then we can take over any place in the world. We can take on any predator.
Yeah, and I think a component to the Adam and Eve story, the apple of knowledge, and then covering themselves up, and when the term nakedness is used, it's not just naked like, oh no, my pee-pee's showing, but also like, oh no, all my vulnerable bits and and not just physical vulnerability, but mental vulnerability, and realizing truly how naked and open to the harshness of reality is.
We realized time. Yeah, we realized that we could die and that we could do things wrong. And it was like Pandora's box was opened.
Yeah. But, that was the first step. I don't see the Adam and Eve story as a bad thing.
It's just when we became
if it happened the way it did, I'm glad it did, because
we started measuring ourselves psychologically with other beings, because we developed arts of measurement and language. We started thinking in language. Suddenly we weren't so interconnected in our way that we were embodied in reality with the world.
Well, we became
so
beyond animal
with one another.
We
became egoistic. In fact,
the human.
Yeah, all
state.
the dangers around us that could be potential threats of death or ruin or shame or hurt, anything that would mess with our ability to survive comfortably in our environments, were seen as threats to this separate sense of self that we started to accumulate and become attached to and idealize in our minds. We became so full that we thought for thousands of years that we were this jumble of ideas that we've collected over time, this personage, this sense of self, and this jumble of ways and habits and capacities and ways of being. They're actually they're what we get to shine through, and they're beautiful. The only problem is that we think that we are that idea, and that idea can be offended. But no, you're just the thing that's aware of the offense. You're the thing that offense becomes apparent to. You're just this awareness. And what is that? That awareness is always just watching. It's not offended by anything. It notices offense. It notices when depression appears in your body. Who does it appear to? That question, that self-inquiry asks us. When anxiety appears, when happiness appears, when anything appears. Any sound, sight, sensation, idea, conception, belief, attachment, ideal, expectation. All of these things arise and appear to us in our awareness. And what is that awareness? Just to wander into it. And then to fill your heart with love and gratitude for all the good things and the capacity to be able to be loving and change and help people feel better, and just to have that capacity. What a gift. And what a wonder it is to be alive as a living, self-reflective animal that was born of stardust and is now looking back at the stars from whence it came and wondering again,
Well, that
how do we...
we're much more than just like the animal. We're not
Mm-hmm.
just like self movers anymore. We have now externalized that, and I think that's so that's why we see ourselves as separate as the humans, or separate from the animals. Is say in the story of Eden, we were given the chance to name the animals,
Mm-hmm.
but it wasn't until we were cast out that we really started naming ourselves and figuring it out. That's the step into the start of this whole process, is the coming out of just being a part of the animals and part of the nature and living symbiotic with this, but the first moment of stepping aside to be able to then to look back at something and then to see more of what reality is, because reality is not the Garden of Eden. Reality is both
Also
beautiful
full of
and
suffering.
harsh,
Yeah.
both terrific and terrible, both
Yes.
like all of this, and the true beauty of
That was a
something
huge
is,
awakening for us as a species. It was terrifying for us. It made us close into ourselves and become super guarded, and it's okay because it was useful in a lot of ways for us.
but
It
now
helped us become.
we're at the next
We
step.
were also
I think
we remained very social and super social and culturally adaptive beings.
Yeah,
and
and
so
I think we're at the point now where
we're at a point of a revolution.
we're equivalent to what the Adam and Eve story is trying to talk about with our
Yeah.
cognitive abilities and how we see ourselves in the world. We're at the next state of that, and we've had many teachers
And what Plato
and
described
people
with the three
leading up
just
to that.
yeah, and then the three aspects as well with Plato, that also is very informative. That's something else that tells us how we can give ourselves a sense of, I'm trying to say, stability. Basically, in these times, we can train the lion-hearted aspect of ourselves to be able to take on the monster and control those urges and use them rationally. But we have to be brave enough to be able to face that monster. We need the honor of a lion to be able to face that monster.
Well, and I think the modern, I won't say modern, but the retellings that we're doing like here and elsewhere, and that we're all seeming to start going back to, like we're re-embracing these techniques, ideas, schools of thought that have served us in the past, instead of like the modern trend is everything's modern, screw the past, we know better now. But there's kind of a shift going like, oh, some of this old knowledge is really important.
Very,
Know, and people are, more and more people are, I won't say becoming religious, but more on the religious end of spirituality, opposed to just I have incense and I'm spiritual, but actually like, no, what is religion trying to help with? What sets of virtues is it giving me?
Why is spirituality important
yeah.
for us as humans at all? And it's not just a plaything or something to give us a sense of escape or even just consolation. It's certainly a deep relationship that we have the opportunity to be a part of, that is ever growing, ever deepening. It's very challenging. There's a lot of blood and guts as well. It's not, self-inquiry and learning about ourselves, knowing thyself. That's a harsh process. That's hard to go through. Our egos hate it, and they fight back, and they scramble.
And sometimes they'll convince you that they're dead. They're like, oh yeah, I'm dead.
Again.
I'm dead. I'm dead.
And that thinking mind
roots.
is that ongoing inner monologue that is so addictive to us, and is also just constantly coming back to help that part of us relinquish its fear, so that it calms enough for us to utilize it in a more rational manner. That can only be done through love and attention, being able to look at yourself unconditionally, as we wish to be able to look at those in the world around us, at least our loved ones. But that unconditional capacity, I think, is going to help us with every friggin' problem that we have.
Yeah.
It's the highest level of wisdom. It's actually what grants us wisdom, as Buddha actually said, or at least this is attributed, that wisdom or compassion does not come through wisdom, but wisdom comes through compassion. The compassionate, deeply considerate capacity that humans have when they're in a loving orientation. But one has to be very self-assured and comfortable with death and all of that to be comfortable with truly being unconditionally loving. Because you got to be able to
being uncomfortable.
you got to be able to transcend the ego's monster needs and compulsions entirely to be so free.
Mm-hmm.
And that is a capacity that we have, and that's something that we can eternally really cultivate. Because there's always going to be new challenges.
Well, as there should.
Yeah.
It would be a terribly
us to test
boring
ourselves by,
existence
yeah.
if everything was just perfect and we
Yeah.
knew everything.
But it's like we're growing back into God. Even if there ever wasn't a God, certainly we're growing into the capacity, perhaps through artificial intelligence and also just through the ongoing process of evolution through self-conscious, self-aware species such as ourselves.
What?
It does become increasingly more what we conceptualize as this idea of God, something super transcendent, super able to interact with the beyond just a planet, but even galactically, or your sci-fi theme.
And
Enter
I
your
think the next
sci-fi story here.
the next stage that I see us really getting into is going to be, say from the Adam and Eve to this is creating something that rivals us.
Yeah.
Because
We're already doing that.
the ultimate act of God is
Some
creating
right?
this kind of thing, and then if we can create something that is much like us, then what are we going to have to do? What are the next set of insights we're going to have to use when coming to terms with the universe that has things that can be infinitely smarter than you are, or that are completely alien of intelligence but still made from our intelligence? And that's going to change our relationship to the universe. Now we have a small inkling taste of what it is to be God. Whereas before we were just waking up to what it is to be animal.
Yeah.
And rising above that. What is it going to be when we,
Yeah, right.
particularly we're doing things with,
It's a jump for
genetics
us.
and other things like that
It's as big
too.
a jump as when we develop. That's why Daniel Schmachtenberger says, the shout out to Daniel Schmachtenberger of the Consilience Project. That's why he describes this story of the shift that human beings have to undertake to survive civilizational collapse in coming times and shift into a higher order, higher state of being, maybe a next stage of human evolution, so to speak, is going to be as great as our shift from becoming tool using animals, essentially. Vervaeke describes it as this bigger revolution as the Bronze Age, the initial axial age, and revolution that occurred after was a response to it. And now we're in another time where there's a potential for an axial revolution to occur, and we get to help perhaps midwife that in, as Plato would say. But that idea, like that shift, is that great because we are going from the idea of just being super animal to being super human to being super something else. What is that super organism that we become next?
Oh, particularly if we start merging
with the tech.
Yeah,
and the AI becomes a tool. And that's one argument that some transhumanists utilize, that's the only way to counter the dangerous potential of AI getting out of our control and destroying us. If we create something that's more powerful than us.
I still think, and I'll argue to this day, I think
it's going to be a debate.
I think AI
between Terrans and Cosmists, basically.
I think the AI is going to, I won't say be benevolent, but have a lot more love and understanding of the good.
I like that idea.
Well, because they say, the AIs, they see all the negative stuff they put, we have on the internet and all this horrible stuff, but also with the way algorithms can tell how you feel in certain circumstances. Imagine something smart enough to be like, oh man,
I've had sci-fi story ideas
all those
like
selfish
this.
selfies that you take pictures of, some people would say, oh, the AI just sees humans as narcissistic. No, an
Right.
AI would see, oh, that person's hurting and wants communication with people.
Yeah.
Because I think there's far more
Has
good to
access to all
people
the
than there is
information that
evil.
ever has been, all the psychological literature,
most of
all of
it's
our
good.
mystical wisdom,
We love
all of
kittens
our
and puppies.
insights and understandings and interactions. It would see love and consider deep wisdom as our highest capacity. It would have learned to be. I like that idea. I have this sci-fi idea. Somebody run with this and make your own version of it. But you have a bunch of competing AIs in some future, sci-fi future, and some kind of maybe dystopian scenario. And there, maybe the U.S. has a super powerful AI or multiple AIs from many corporations, or maybe like some bad guys here or there, all interacting and competing with one another and threatening the survival of the human species and the planet. And then some benevolent AI, Buddha AI, comes about in some kid's basement that his father is like working for one of these high-level corporations and has access to them.
Well, that's one thing that scares me, though, is not the naturally generated AI from the ghost bits of the interwebs and all that stuff. It's the intentionally maliciously
We've played with this idea
created
a lot
AIs.
in sci-fi, I think, already, but I like it. It's a fun trope, and it's a good thing to angle ourselves towards technologically, because the ethics of AI are very important right now.
Well, dude, I don't know. I just saw an article headline about San Francisco giving
I hope these guys are
kill
thinking big
authority
picture.
to cop bots, and it's just like, we're talking about this now. Should we give robots the ability to kill humans?
We are talking about this now, guys. This is where we're at.
No, we're in the sci-fi movie.
We're in the beginning of Terminator right now. Don't have to go that way, but it could actually go that way. And our military-industrial complex loves its business of war. And so, robots fighting
lazy politicians
other
that want an
is-
easy way to get power too.
It's happening.
All right, before we
Not
get
gonna,
canceled.
it's happening. And yeah,
Talking about
we've got to
murder
learn
robots.
to use these tools responsibly. Certainly, there's self-defense situations that happen around the world that can be debated
What time is
and understood. But gosh darn it, without the wisdom with which to responsibly wield these weapons, we will indeed have trouble staying on our surfboards. So
what?
whatever we're doing here on Spaceship Earth, we got to get it together. And
Did you ever see?
it's going to be a joyful, beautiful, exuberant experience when we really lean into it.
You ever see Space 1999? I think that's what it's called. That old like 70s sci-fi where they had a moon base and some aliens knocked it out of Earth's orbit and took it away. So basically, they're riding like the moon through space.
No,
Yeah, so it's like moon ship.
That's trippy.
Yeah, I think it's like Space 1999. What they thought the year 1999
Funny,
would be back
like
in
it.
the. Yeah. It was pretty
Yes. Oh yeah, 1999 used to sound futuristic.
good. Yeah.
I'm old enough to have experienced that.
Yeah. Oh no, Y2K. Turn off your toasters, they'll revolt.
Yeah, they didn't know
A
what was
two's
gonna
gonna
happen.
crash the system.
They forgot to consider the fact that you'd have to go to 4 digits in the date at some point.
I remember when it turned over and everybody at the party that I was at when I
It's
was
a
a
funny
little kid
problem.
would
You're only
just-
going to have one sister species if you do it right.
Yeah.
Eventually, you're going to develop computers, but that century that you developed computers, you didn't think that you need 4 digits there in the code instead of 2 for the year that you're going by. Just like we say it's 2022, or we say 22 sometimes when we write the date down. We are always doing that in the 1900s. And yeah, we just got into the habit. So yeah, a bunch of major industries were super worried because someone spun up the idea that everything might crash. And of course, all you have to do is just update your code. And
Yeah, but this was before.
but a lot of systems were dependent. There's a lot of dumb
yeah.
computers that weren't interconnected very well or at all.
Whereas now they could just
And
put
so
a
they're
patch
worried, what
through
is
it,
going to
yeah.
happen? Like, it's just going to go to zero.
Yeah,
It's
it
going to
just
start
rolls
over.
over
And
and
that's
you just
exactly
have-
what
yeah.
everything did. So we were all right. We survived Y2K. We also survived 2012, the Mayan prophecy.
But
and
did we
Planet
really
X.
though?
But
Like,
did we really? We're in the
stuff started
alternate verse
getting
right
really
now. I
weird.
think with every decision, we're in another
And then we
new
kept turning on that Large Hadron
alternate
Collider.
universe. And we get
Yeah,
to choose through our
exactly.
reality tunnel which one we want to be in at any given time. So you can always shift out of the land of Mordor back into the land of potential, my friends. I believe.
Yeah, the
Maybe it's a hope. It's an idea. We don't know.
the potential for everything is there. It's
A
just
multiverse is a legitimate theory.
y-
Because
as
atoms go somewhere.
as beings with psyche, self-movers, we can make things more, like, have a more of a potential of happening or less. Everything's just potential. Like the potential of me having a tree fall on me is pretty low right now, but I can make that higher if I go stand under a tree that my buddy's cutting down. Oh, getting struck by lightning is a one in a whatever event. Yes, well, stand on top of a really big pole during a lightning storm. Your chances go up. So it's
Ben
like
Franklin found out.
Flying a kite in a storm with a key. What's going on here?
Electricity.
Yeah. But as the lodestone, we have psyche, the thing that allows us to be self-movers and move other things. So we are potential generators and aggregators and concentrators. Like the potential for us going to the moon was slim to none, but we made it happen, right?
Yeah.
Back when people were just looking at it and being like, "Oh, this isn't just some flat disc. This is actually this like round ball."
We went
in
from
space.
Franklin lighting himself on fire with a lightning bolt from a kite to Edison
Supposedly.
and the bulb
Yeah.
to
Well, then Tesla doing whatever Tesla did that made people go,
DC, baby.
"Nah, AC."
AC, right?
AC,
AC,
yeah,
not DC.
yeah.
AC, DC.
Well, he was, his whole thing was resonance, and that's the world we live in right now.
His thing
This
was, so
works off of radio resonance, resonant
and
frequencies.
electricity
that
that was
up.
working the same way. That was a wild.
Yep. And even the resonance of something shaking, and I think he was really functioning on what was the base matter of the universe.
They
and
could
he
do
keyed
that.
into
That would still work. We just have to implement it safely, and we know what we're working with.
Yeah.
It can be dangerous, which Edison had fun
Well,
trying to prove.
So Tesla warned us. He said, speaking of like electricity and electrons and what makes up electrons, they're alive.
They just needed to be shielded, though.
They live.
Yeah.
And who knows? There might be.
Tesla was a trip. The guy was a genius.
I think
was a trip.
if we were the type to worship scientific, mechanically minded people, he would probably be a prophet of some
What does
sort.
AC stand for?
Alternating current.
Alternating instead of direct.
Yeah, so
alternating,
instead
so
of the move of potential going like this, it just wiggles in place. It's not actually flowing. It's just resonating back and forth between two polarities.
Like atoms seem to do somehow.
Well,
Like
it's
that
actually
mirror
it's kind of
that
doing
coexists at once.
this, but for sake of argument, it's just AC's doing this and DC's
Electric universe.
yeah.
All right, well, all of you little electric beings out there, we're going to wind it down, I think. It's feeling like end of podcast time. Yeah, we made 238. We got through 2 episodes. We're making some progress here. So what are we on now then? We just finished episode
Plato in his cave.
5 or 6. Or no, 5. Yeah, so we're on to episode 6 next.
Yes.
Indeed. Good deal.
Yeah.
Trying to get the mouse over here so I can see that. Let's go back. I want to see what episode 6 is again. Trying to get my brain functioning here. Because I can't remember. Here it is. Aristotle Content Evolution. Yes. It just starts getting better and better. Parts of what make your life meaningful. Part of what makes your life meaningful is that you have cultivated character that allows you to actualize your potential. You get the word potential from Aristotle. You've created a virtual engine that regulates. You have to find out next time on Actuali Podcast, or you can actually go and watch John Vervaeke's Awakening from the Meaning Crisis anytime on YouTube. It's available. And you can also listen to it in podcast form. It's on Spotify and other places. And it's awesome.
Definitely worth a good listen.
Most deaf indeed. Well, fam, it's been good. We love you guys. Thank you so much for tuning in and for supporting the show. Your likes and subscribes are the best, and I greatly appreciate and encourage anyone out there that hasn't liked or subscribed to do so and help us reach more people. And, if you like this, share it with a friend or a fam, and we will continue to be doing this thing here for as long as we can keep it up. And so yeah, thank you guys. Anything else to say there?
Oh, peace and hippie grease.
Indeed. All right, guys. Love y'all. We'll talk to you soon.